Bore da, croeso I gyfarfod y bwrdd. Good morning and welcome to today's board meeting. As is the usual practice, we're holding the meeting virtually, and people are able to join and watch and listen to our proceedings live. And also there's an opportunity, of course, if people want to catch up after the meeting, you can do that via our website on our YouTube channel by following the links, the usual links, to reach the recording of today's meeting. We do have simultaneous translation available, which I know we will be using through the meeting. And if people aren't familiar with how to listen to that, if you hover on your screen at the bottom, you'll see a globe icon. If you click on that and then choose Hear Translation if you wish to receive the simultaneous translation. If you don't need simultaneous translation, just remain on original. We'll be taking 2 breaks through today's meeting, a short break mid-morning and then a half-hour break for lunch. And I'm hoping that we'll conclude today's proceedings by about 2:15. Board members will be aware of the consent agenda, that if they had any questions, hopefully they've raised them and they have been answered. If anyone does have anything, then we will try and find somewhere on the agenda to address any issues you might have with your consent agenda. Later, I'm not going to ask people to individually introduce themselves. They're identified with the backgrounds. But we are being joined later today by Darren Griffiths and Nathan Couch of Audit Wales, who join us for item 5.1 later in the meeting. Apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Rowan Gardner, who, as everyone is aware, is taking a short, shall we describe it, sabbatical due to work commitments, and hopefully we'll be welcoming Rowan back in the not too distant future. I don't think there's any other apologies. I think everyone else is here. Thank you. Declarations of interest. I've not been notified of any conflicts of interest by board members prior to the meeting. If anything has occurred to anyone recently, no. Thank you. Okay, if I move then on to the consent agenda, and there are a few to go through, so I'll try and make sure that if people do put their hands up, I notice that. So the first is we're been asked to approve the minutes from the board meeting held on the 25th of January 2024. People content to that? Thank you. We're approving the private abridged minutes from the board meeting held on the 25th of January 2024, and I'd like to confirm that no chair's action was required in the context of the Welsh Emergency Department Solution contract. So people happy to approve those minutes? Thank you. We're noting the actions on the action log, noting the one action marked as underway. Thank you. We're noting the forward work plan at item 2.4. Thank you. We need to approve the annual review of standing orders, item 2.5. People are happy to do that. Thank you. We're approving the board and committee cycle of business, item 2.6. Thank you. We're noting the board and committee self-effectiveness reviews, item 2.7. Thank you. We're noting the emergency planning annual report, item 2.8. Thank you. And now we're approving the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act objectives, because if people will be aware that we now fall within the remit of the Act. People happy to do that? Thank you. And we're fine. I think it's finally noting the. Oh no, we've got 2 more after this. Noting the DHCW follow-up response to the Welsh Parliament Health and Social Care Committee and Public Accounts Public Administration Committee Scrutiny Report, item 2.10. So we're asked to note that. And penultimately, we're approving the Corporate Parenting Charter, item 2.11. Q. And we're approving the DHCW Decarbonisation Action Plan 24 to 27. People happy to do that. Sorry, it's a long list today. It's a March meeting, so as people will be aware, there's an awful lot of stuff to get through in the March meeting. So if I move then on to the main agenda and the chair and vice chair report, and I'll just pick out a couple of things and then ask Ruth if there's anything she particularly wants to highlight. Because Ruth had quite a busy period recently. She covered on a number of things for me when I was on holiday, so thank you very much for doing that, Ruth. The couple of things I'd like to pick up on is under the program governance arrangements, the update. we are on course to have achieved all of the changes to the new approaches, the new form of governance by the 1st of April. The last programme to completing that journey is the digital medicines programme, but that will be in the new arrangements will be in place from the 1st of April. The other thing to note that as a result of some advice from the auditors or some observations of the commenters, I've stepped back from chairing the programme committee. I forgot what the D stands for. The PDC, and David Selway very kindly agreed to chair that committee. So thank you very much for that, David. Board, just briefly on the board development, we had a very useful board development session recently where we started to look at where we could go in terms of supporting the care bit and addressing the care bit in our remit, and that I think it was a very good start to that process, but it's certainly something that we need to return to. And I know that Sam Hall is very much engaged in this area of work, and it's something that Alistair is very keen on us keeping our foot on the gas in terms of looking at where we might go and what we might do. The independent member update, just one thing just to draw to your attention, that Marion Jones has agreed to join the independent member network. So thank you very much for agreeing to do that, Marion. Then there is something that's identified as a meeting with the Royal College of Ophthalmologists. To be fair to her, it's probably, I should have picked this up, it's actually a meeting with the Minister at which the Royal College of Ophthalmologists were also present, and that was to look at where things are going with the eye care programme. And as we sit here, we're still waiting for decisions on funding that programme. We're very keen, and we are working, and again, Sam is leading on this, working very closely with Sam Hall is leading on this, working very closely with the Royal College to get a clinically led and a clinically driven solution application in place. And that we very much hope to do as fast as we possibly can, but it will be entirely dependent on receiving the funding to enable us to do that. And I know Sam is working closely with Welsh Government and others to try and get that decision as quickly as we possibly can. And then finally, and I think she's joining us remotely, but to welcome Diana Storia, who is, and it's a horrible word, is a mentee, but is someone who's very keen to join a health board as an independent member in the future. And the Welsh Government have developed a programme where people are joining health boards for a period of time as mentees throughout Wales. And I know myself and others on the board, Ruth and others on the board, have both met Diana recently, and will be working with Diana to introduce her to the delights of independent membership of a health board, in our case a board in health in Wales. And finally, and the tense is wrong on the last bit. It's a past tense. I have yet to affix the common seal, but I will be doing that at some point during today. So if I seek approval for affixing the common seal, which is on a lease on Bochum House, people happy for me to affix the common seal? Thank you. Ruth, is there anything you particularly wanted to pick out from your items in your written report?
I think the items are as they are. It was a slightly strange but very helpful flurry of activity with the minister over recent weeks, given that all the ministers were in the position of not knowing whether they'd be continuing when the new First Minister came into office. I think because of the focus on objectives and getting objectives in place, and the focus on digital transformation that we had those conversations in some of those meetings, it's obviously very helpful for us that there'll be continuity of the health minister after she was reappointed. So you know, I look forward to those conversations continuing, and the early implementation of Chair's objectives this year, Simon.
Oh, perhaps that's something I should have mentioned in terms of Chair's objectives. I have had my draft objectives for 24-25. There are a number of issues in them that I want to raise with the minister and the team who've drafted the objectives. As they stand at the moment, I don't think they're quite where they need to be in the context of some of them. I don't necessarily think are right for a chair, rather than someone directly involved in the operational side of our work. But I'll continue to report back to the board on where I am with my objectives and through future meetings. Thank you. Can I then move to the next item and invite Helen to give her Chief Executive's report. Helen, over to you.
Thank you, Diolch, Chair. Just a couple of things to highlight from the report. I think it's I always like to kind of highlight the staff briefing. It's a great opportunity for me to kind of reach across the organisation and have a conversation, actually, now that we're doing it through kind of an open Teams environment. So it's great to get those direct questions and see staff on the screen, really, because we're still doing them virtually. So we're still getting 400 or 500 people who are attending the staff briefing sessions. And it was good to get into a bit of detail, really, in terms of some of the results of our the DHCW staff survey. And of course, we've now got some of the data coming through now from the NHS Wales staff survey, so there'll be more work for us to do in that space. And we spend a bit of time going through the long-term strategy and the IMTP, encouraging the staff to nominate for the recognition awards that will happen in a few months' time, and a real focus actually on user-centred design, which I think is a topic that's close to all our hearts. So yeah, really good sessions with the staff and some good engagement there. I also wanted to just do a quick highlight on the IMTP and the development of this year's IMTP. I'm not going to go into any detail because clearly we've got a big chunk of the agenda for that, but I just wanted to thank all of the teams for their hard work, really, in terms of the development of the IMTP this year. I think it really sets out what we're about as an organisation, what we're trying to achieve through the planning cycle. It's not been without its challenges, but just to note that we have had our core uplift in line with the health board's 3.67%, which of course Claire and Evan will go through in their sections. So that does mean that we're able to produce a balanced plan in terms of our core. And in terms of our development funding, there is less than anticipated available because of the context that the financial context that the whole of the NHS in Wales finds itself in. So, and even we'll get into the detail of what that actually means in terms of the way we've approached that in the plan as we go through that. But just to say, we'll continue to work with colleagues across the system and with Welsh Government in exploring opportunities for further funding to really progress some of the kind of priority initiatives that we've got. And just to call out, really, we've done quite a lot this year in terms of our development programmes and particularly leadership development. So we had our second roundtable session with Alex Howells back in February, and really grateful to Alex for giving her time so freely and actually being so open to all of the questions that she was asked from our staff. So it was great to have that session with Alex, and we've got one coming up with Judith Paget next month, I believe. So looking forward to that. And we had a full day. I say away day, actually the away day's in the office now, but it was good to see so many people really get involved and to be creating those connections or reconnecting with perhaps colleagues that they're not spending as much time with, as we're not in the office as much as we used to. So yeah, really good energy in the room and energy in terms of the organisation and the leadership development that we're taking forward. So those were probably the ones to pull out, I think, Simon.
Thank you very much, Helen. Any questions to Helen? Oh, go on, Marion. Oh, Marion, your hand went up briefly.
Indeed, Simon, I have a question to Helen, and I'll speak in Welsh if I may. Helen, diolch yn fawr am rannu lefelau gwych o ymgysylltu sy'n digwydd efo staff yn y cyfarfodydd hynny. Oeddech chi'n cyfeirio rwan at yr arolwg staff, a meddwl oeddwn ni tybed oes na unrhyw uchafbwyntiau, unrhyw brif negeseuon y fydde'n dda i ni fel bwrdd fod yn ymwybodol ohonyn nhw o ran yr arolwg staff sydd newydd i gynnal. Diolch.
Yeah, thank you, Marion. Well, I think the highlights, and we will clearly bring the detail back to board once we've had all of a chance to go through all of the data, and it's come through to us in stages. But in terms of the NHS Wales staff survey, we had a 60% response rate for DHCW. It was 20% overall for NHS Wales. So, fairly low, but really pleased that from an organisation perspective, we've got that 60% coverage there, which gives us a good insight. We had an 82% engagement score, which is calculated from a number of the questions. So the highest engagement score across organisations in Wales, which we're really pleased about. But of course, there are, the devil's in the detail of all of this, and really what we would want to look at are where are the areas for improvement or areas of focus really for us. And I think that one of the overriding and on the preliminary data that we've had through is the focus on fatigue, perhaps, staff feeling, not high numbers, but we have got kind of a bit of a sentiment which actually is mirrored right across the NHS. That's no surprise, I think, to any of us, is that, that things are very, very pressured at the moment. But I would say, and SJ can correct me if I'm wrong, that I think it does speak to good levels of morale across our organisation, really high levels of engagement, and people feeling really proud to work as part of our organisation. But we do need to take note of all of the feedback that we've had and make sure that we develop the action plans associated with that. So we'll be bringing that back to a future board meeting.
Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Helen. Okay. No other hands. Okay, if we move then on to the next section of the agenda, looking at strategic items, and the first one, 4.1, is looking at, and we'll be asked to approve it as a board, our long-term strategy. And I invite Ifan Evans, the Executive Director of Strategy, to introduce the item. Over to you, Ifan.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Simon. Wy'n creu bod slides yn mynd i ddod lan ar y sgrin mewn eiliad, felly wrth bod ni'n paratoi am hynny, jyst i ddweud bod y papur yn gofyn am ddau beth oddi wrth y bwrdd. Yn gyntaf i nodi yr adborth i ni wedi cael a'r broses ni wedi dilyn, felly byddai'n sôn dipyn bach am hynny, a wedyn i gymeradwyo y papur, y strategaeth hir dymor bydd yn cael ei gyhoeddi yn dilyn y cyfarfod yma ar ôl penwythnos y Pasg. Mae'n debyg, a wedyn byddwn ni'n defnyddio'r strategaeth a byddwn ni'n gwneud gwaith hyrwyddo ac ymgysylltu o'i gwmpas e. Cyn i fi gychwyn, wi eisiau diolch yn fawr iawn i'r tîm sydd wedi arwain ar y gwaith o lunio y strategaeth a'r gwaith cyfathrebu byddai'n sôn amdano mewn moment. Mae'n cynnwys Bryn yn pennaeth strategaeth, a hefyd y tîm ymgysylltu o dan y dyn a tîm cyfathrebu o dan Julia sydd wedi gwneud gwaith da iawn yn ystod mis Chwefror, ac hefyd wrth gwrs yn staff ni gyd sydd wedi cyfrannu i'r strategaeth. Os ewn ni i'r sleid nesaf, wy'n gwybod hwn yn weddol, can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you, diolch. So wy'n gwybod bod hyn yn weddol gyfarwydd i bobl ni wedi sôn amdano fe ym mis Ionawr, wrth bod ni yn wrth bod y bwrdd yn cymeradwyo'r strategaeth drafft i'w gyhoeddi. Ond wi jyst eisiau pwysleisio bod hwn yn broses sydd wedi rhedeg am 9 mis o leiaf, os nad blwyddyn, a bod ni wedi cychwyn gyda y themau uwch a wedyn wedi mireinio rheini yn ystod 2023 cyn cyhoeddi'r strategaeth drafft. A wedyn wedi cael cyfnod weddol ddwys o gyfathrebu ac ymgysylltu trwy mis Chwefror. Wy'n fodlon iawn ar sut mae hynna wedi mynd. Wedi treulio mis o gyfarfodydd 1 i 1, o seminarau agored dros Teams yn Gymraeg ac yn Saesneg, defnyddio arolwg ar-lein, yn rhoi'r cyfle i unrhyw un i ymateb i'r strategaeth a cynnig sylwadau ar y strategaeth hynny ar draws yr NHS i gyd ac yn ehangach oedd yn ddogfen hollol gyhoeddus, yn arolwg gyhoeddus. A ni wedi cael cryn dipyn o adborth dros, wel nagos i 96 o ymatebion i'r strategaeth, a dros bron yr un nifer, tua 95 yn credu o bobl wedi dod i'r gweithdai ni wedi rhedeg ar seminarau hynny, a ni wedi cael adborth defnyddiol a cyfoethog iawn oddi wrth y bobl hynna. Os i ni'n gallu mynd, a wedyn dilyn hynny, ni wedi adolygu'r strategaeth a'r strategaeth yn dilyn yr adolygiadau hynny sydd ger eich bron chi heddiw. Os fedrwn ni fynd i'r sleid nesaf, na i sôn am rai o'r themau ni wedi clywed. Credu mae'r peth wy'n fwyaf hapus gyda yw y lefel uchel o bobl sydd yn cytuno neu'n cytuno'n gryf gyda prif themau y strategaeth wedwn ni. Felly, strwythyr y strategaeth yn erbyn yr 5 mission, a wedyn ein gweledigaeth ni a'n pwrpas ni, a'r ffordd i ni wedi cynnwys a wedi disgrifio yn amcanion strategol ni. rhwng 75 a 85% o bobl yn cytuno neu'n cytuno'n gryf gyda hynny, a wy'n credu bod hwnna yn rhywbeth cadarnhaol tu hwnt, a rhywbeth wy'n hapus iawn i weld. Yn ddiddorol, oedd rhai o bobl yn dweud bod ein amcanion strategol ni yn rhy heriol, a oedd yna bobl eraill yn dweud bod nhw ddim yn ddigon heriol. Felly, wy'n cymryd o hynny bod ni'n pitcho nhw yn y lle iawn. Yr amcan gyda ni oedd bod nhw'n mynd i fod yn stretching, hynny yw bod nhw yn gwthio ni rhywfaint, ond bod nhw ddim yn anghyreddadwy, a gan bod rai bobl yn gweud bod nhw yn rhy heriol, a rhai'n gweud bod nhw ddim yn ddigon heriol, wy'n teimlo bod ni'n cael hynna yn y lle iawn, dwi'n meddwl. Gaethon ni lot fawr o sylwadau manwl. Maen nhw'n dod o dan nifer o themau, neu ni wedi ceisio delio gyda nhw gyda themau. Ni wedi edrych ar bob un o'r adroddiadau o'r sylwadau hynny mewn spreadsheet anferth. A rhai o'r pethau oedd yn dod allan oedd mwy ynglyn â deallusrwydd artiffisial, mwy ynglyn â rhannu data a phethau tebyg, a mwy ynglyn â disgrifio sut i ni'n cysylltu gyda strategaethau gyda Llywodraeth a hefyd gyda gweithredaeth yr NHS yn newydd. So, fedrwch chi weld hynny ar ochr dde y sgrin, sut i ni wedi ymateb i hynny. So, wrth bod fi'n dod i ben, byddai'n rhoi ambell i slaid ar y diwedd, ond bydd rhain yn gyfarwydd i chi. So, dau beth wych tynnu sylw at. Un yw, mi roedd na bobl yn holi i ni lle mae'r cynllun cyflawni, lle mae'r cerrig milltir yn y strategaeth. A ni wedi bod yn glir o'r cychwyn. Mae'r IMTP yw'r cerrig milltir, yr IMTP yw'r cynllun gweithredol yn erbyn y strategaeth. Mae'r strategaeth yn rhywbeth sydd yn sefyll yn llonydd am nifer o flynyddoedd. Dyma sydd yn gweud le i ni eisiau cyrraedd erbyn diwedd y ddegawd. Ond fel ni'n gwybod, a fel byddwn ni'n sôn nes ymlaen yn y cyfarfod hwn, mae sefyllfa newid o'n cwmpas ni trwy'r amser, a wy'n credu bod ni'n cael dull llawer iawn gwell o ymateb i'r newidiadau hynny drwy ddefnyddio'r IMTP sydd yn cael ei adolygu a'i adnewyddu yn flynyddol i wneud hynny. A wedyn ni wedi ychwanegu 2 amcan strategol newydd. Mi roedd na 19 ohonyn nhw gyda ni yn y strategaeth drafft, a mis Ionawr. Mae yna 20 gyda ni nawr, a y 2 newydd i ni wedi ychwanegu. Mae un ynglyn â rhannu data, diogelwch data, ac yn arbennig rhannu data ar draws iechyd a gofal cymdeithasol, a gwneud hynny mewn ffordd mwy strwythuredig gyda fframwaith sy'n cael ei defnyddio yn eang, a wedyn ar un olaf yr ailyn yw darparu deallusrwydd artiffisial automeiddio. A ni wedi cysylltu hynna gyda bod yn fwy cynhyrchiol, fel bod ni'n glir pam i ni'n defnyddio AI, mwyn bod ni'n galluogi bobl i weithio yn fwy effeithiol ac yn fwy cynhyrchiol. Mae dyna un o'r pethau gallu wneud ar draws yr NHS yn ei gyfarwydd. Os ewn ni i'r sleid olaf, bydd rhain nawr yn mynd yn gyfarwydd iawn i chi, gobeithio. So dyma'r un yw, fel petai, strategaeth ar un tudalen, yn dangos y 5 nod sydd yn yr IMTP hefyd sydd yn gyfarwydd, a wedyn y 5 egwyddor byddwn ni'n defnyddio i ceisio llunio'n penderfyniadau ni dros y blynyddoedd nesaf, a wedyn am ein gwerthoedd ni a'n gweledigaeth a'n pwrpas i gyd ar yr un slaid yma, a wedyn os ewch chi i'r sleid olaf byddai'n gyflwyno chi fan hyn. Mae hwnna'n dangos yr 20 amcan strategol wedi cyflwyno o dan bob un o'r missions. So, os oes yna un sleid arall. Ie, a dyma ni. So mae hwn yn dangos yr 20 amcan strategol. A un o'r pethau gwnaethon ni, Simon, nes ti sôn am y cyfarfod datblygu gyda'r bwrdd, oedd gosod yr amcanion strategol hyn ochr yn ochr gyda'r IMTP mwyn rhoi sicrwydd i'n hunain bod yr IMTP yn cymryd ni yn y cyfeiriad cywir a bod y pethau ni'n mynd i wneud dros y 2 mlynedd nesaf yn gyrru ni tuag at ble ni eisiau bod yn 2030. Dwi'n credu oedd hwnna'n broses ddefnyddiol iawn, a oedd hwnna'n dangos i ni sut mae defnyddio'r 5 cenhadaeth mewn ffordd strwythuredig yn gyson trwy'n holl ddogfennau ni yn galluogi ni fod yn glir beth ni'n gwneud yn y tymor byr, tymor canolig a'r tymor hir. Felly, wy'n fach iawn, wy'n wirioneddol fach o gallu cyflwyno'r strategaeth. Wy'n credu bod y ddogfen yn un lan, a bod e'n un clir, a bod e'n un weddol hawdd i'w ddilyn, a bod e'n crisialu beth i ni eisiau gwneud, a bod e'n mynd i fod yn arf defnyddiol iawn i ni fel bwrdd dros y blynyddoedd nesaf, yn arbennig oherwydd bod e'n brysur. Allai ddim tanlinellu digon i aelodau pa mor brysur yw i o ddydd i ddydd. A mae'n bwysig felly bod y strategaeth yn rhywbeth sy'n rhoi amcan cyson i ni 5-6 mlynedd allan, tua diwedd y ddegawd, fel bod ni'n gwybod i ba gyfeiriad i ni'n mynd, achos i ni drwy'r amser yn gorfod delio gyda beth sydd o'n blaenau ni, ond ar yr un pryd mae rhaid i ni sicrhau bod ni ar drywydd strategol sy'n cymryd ni i rhywle gwahanol, a fi'n credu bod y strategaeth yn cyflawni'r gwaith ni yn dda a mewn ffordd clir iawn ac yn eglur iawn. Felly, wy'n cymerwyd efo i chi fel bwrdd ac yn gobeithio byddwch chi yn hapus i dderbyn y strategaeth.
Diolch, Ifan. Thank you very much. If we just take a second. Thank you. I can see people now. Helen and then Marion.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to kind of say how pleased I am that we have got the long-term strategy kind of as our third birthday present, really, isn't it? We've talked about this quite a lot as a board, and it is our birthday or anniversary. I'm not sure which it is, really, this weekend, actually, isn't it? So I think it's great to see. I think we've got to a place where I think Ifan uses the word clean, but it's a clear structure. I'm really supporting that strategy on a page that ties together what we're about, what's our purpose as an organisation, what we're trying to achieve, and how we'll do it. So really pleased, and there are stretching kind of objectives in there to take us to the end of the decade, but that's the point, isn't it? We've got to make some significant progress, and we've got to stretch into those ambitious goals that we've set ourselves. So yeah, I just want to say thank you to Ifan and Bryn and the team, and to thank all of our stakeholders and our staff, really, who've given us some of that insight and steer, really, to make it what, you know, a strategy I think that we could be proud of, that gives us that North Star to aim for in terms of our planning cycles now going forward. So thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I was on mute nearly then. Marion, we'll take a couple of comments. I've got 4 people with hands up, Ifan. I'll take Marion and then Chris, and then come back to you, and then take David and Alistair and come back to you. Marion.
Diolch, Cadeirydd, a diolch Ifan am gyflwyno'r strategaeth. Mae hon yn garreg milltir bwysig i ni fel bwrdd, dwi'n credu, yn enwedig i ni fel oedd Helen yn sôn rwan yn dathlu yn penblwydd yn 2 oed. Da ni wedi aros yn hir amdani, a dwi'n meddwl bod symlrwydd ac clyrder y strategaeth i ryw raddau yn tan chwarae'r holl waith caled sydd wedi mynd y tu ôl i gyrraedd y pwynt yma heddiw. Dwi'n meddwl bod ni'n galonogol gweld gymaint o ymgysylltu sydd wedi bod, a cymaint o awgrymiadau a diwygiadau i chi wedi wneud fel mewn ymateb i'r sylwadau hynny. A dwi'n meddwl bod o'n tanlinellu cryfder y broses ymgysylltu sydd wedi bod, a dwi'n credu gallwn ni fel bod yn falch iawn o hynny. Ac yn ola, jyst i ddweud, dwi'n meddwl bod y ddau amcan ychwanegol i ni wedi ychwanegu'r fframwaith a'r amcan benodol na o ran deallusrwydd artiffisial yn ychwanegiadau pwysig. A dwi'n hapus iawn i gymeradwyo'r strategaeth. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Marion. Chris.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Ifan. I really like the strategy. I think it's fantastic work that's been done. It gives...
Oh, Chris is frozen.
Gives the organisation a real
Chris,
strong...
Chris, you might need to just repeat, go back to the beginning. You froze, so we lost you after your first sentence, I'm afraid.
Yeah, yes, Chris, could you say those nice things again, please?
Apologies, yeah. So it's just congratulations to Ifan and the team. It's a really clear strategy. I think it's really important for us organisationally. It gives us a strong sense of direction for both staff and stakeholders around our long-term strategic direction, which is clearly critical for us as a still relatively new organisation, but I think it has been a missing piece of the jigsaw for us for a while. The bit I wanted to focus on was the what you described as kind of stretching objectives. There's 20. I think that's nice. It's clear, not too many, and they will be tracked via the IMTP. But I would be keen to see progress just against those 20 in a very simple way, a sentence or two, at least annually, come back to the board. Partly because we'll come on to our structured assessment feedback later in the agenda, and there was some advice from Audit Wales around making sure the board have good oversight of how we're tracking strategies, none more important than our long-term organizational strategy. And some of them, as you say, are quite stretching, and there's a bit of nuance in some of them. They're overarching, aren't they? So I just think it's probably important from a board perspective that we keep track of those 20 and don't lose any of the nuance within the IMTP. But I think the strategy itself is great. Thank you.
Could I just add to that before asking you to comment, Ivan? I mean, the one thing you should never have is a strategy that sits on a shelf gathering dust, is it? So it may well be that what we want to do is have an annual conversation around where our long-term strategy looks like in the context of what's happened or what is happening, because there may well be things that have changed that would impact on our strategy. So at that point, you could also do the, as you've suggested, Chris, the where are we against those 20 objectives review. Ivan, did you want to?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And as well as members will know, we've worked very hard to try to make as many of our strategic objectives measurable using numerical KPIs. So they've got numbers in them, or they use a word like all, which is equivalent to 100%. Or they talk about top quartile, although I have been corrected by statisticians. It's not top quartile, it's upper quartile. But top quartile sounds a lot better in a strategy. And I think it'd be very useful if we did report annually on that and started to get into that habit from, well, from a year from now, if we're publishing the strategy on the 1st of April on our 3rd birthday, as it were, then we should come back at the end of each year and assure ourselves that we are making progress against those things and report on the number of active users for the app and take a view on whether that's getting us to where we want to get to quickly enough. And if it isn't, what do we do about that in order to speed up? And I think that would be a useful mechanism.
Thank you, David, and then Alistair.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Ivan. Well done on the process you've gone through. It's got us to a good place. I'm really pleased that the consultation has added some things to the document. That's always an encouraging sign. I, like Marion, welcome the addition of the deploy AI and automation. I think that's something that's going to be a big game changer going forward. And just on that, you've allocated under mission 4, which has got 3 sub-strategies, I think we call them at the moment. I'm assuming this will be a 4th, so just seeking confirmation of that. Any indication of timelines on when that might surface will be good. And my final point is I, like the others, support approval of the strategy.
Thank you, David. Alistair.
Yeah, like colleagues, I think it's a really, really excellent piece of work. Really, really fine strategy, and the process, as David's just said, I think it gives us a lot of reassurance that it's been fine-tuned and it's built in some really constructive points. So I really congratulate Ivan and all the colleagues involved in this, in building the strategy. So really well done. I just wanted to also really just remind us that it's of course a strategy and it's about the things that we do, but the absolutely key thing is the outcomes, the benefits, the improvements that they lead to. And of course, this is not trying to state everything there, but as a board, I think that's what we really do need to see and keep our eye on. So we're very busy as an organization. That is extremely clear, and the purpose, the strategic objectives, very well set out. In what way are they leading to outcomes that benefit our residents, that benefit the NHS, and actually achieve our core purpose, as is stated, to make digital a force for good in health and care? So it's only restating that point rather than, it's not a point of criticism, but I really think that becomes absolutely the essence of the value of the strategy. But great job.
Ivan, do you want to pick up on those?
Yeah, thank you.
David,
thanks, Alistair, and thanks for all of the very positive comments, which is great. And I'll pass them on to all of the team, or I'm sure they're watching our board meeting. Benefits, I think, is a really strong point. Simon mentioned our transition to new program governance arrangements, a portfolio office. Last week, I and 14 other people went through professional portfolio management training, which was really helpful in terms of being able to draw on industry standard approaches and benefits prominent in that. And Claire and I are jointly working on how we approach benefits more systematically across our programs. And I'm really keen that benefits is the leading criterion when we come to the tough choices we have to make within programs about the ones that are taking an impact from reduced DPIF funding, as to what we choose to protect and to prioritize, not to salami slice everything, but to use benefits to draw on value to determine what it is that we're doing. So we're trying to bring a stronger discipline across the whole organization, and I think it's a really, really strong point. David, on AI strategy, I don't think we've thought it through to say that we will definitely have an AI sub-strategy, although I think that is mainly because it's an assumption that we're going to need one. The Welsh Government. I think the thing that I still feel I need to navigate is the balance between a DHCW AI strategy for how AI is deployed across the NHS in Wales and the work that the Welsh Government itself is wanting to do on driving an AI strategy across the NHS in Wales. So I represent DHCW on the AI Commission. Simon and I, 2 days ago, I think, were at an AI symposium that was hosted by the Welsh Government in its Cathays Park headquarters. So understandably, there's quite a lot of activity here. We're going to need a plan around it in order to be able to navigate our impact and the resources that we're putting. And I think, as you suggested, probably to slot that in as another strategy against. And if you sense any sort of reservation, well, I'm just conscious that not to immediately dive into the assumption that we've got 20 strategic objectives, so we'll have 20 strategies, one for each of them, to drive us along. You know, I'd on that principle of simplifying everything we do, I'd like to try to cover as much of that progress as I can through our IMTP and through other things, and use strategies when we need to really pull something out as a strategy because, for example, we're not making the progress that we need to, or we want a closer visibility from the board level. So I think we will have one. I don't want to give a commitment that we most definitely will have one by September, because I think we've got some navigating to do in our relationship with NHS partners and with the Welsh Government first.
Thank you, Ivan. Anyone else wants to comment? Sarah Jane.
Yeah, thank you. I just think from the workforce perspective, it's an incredibly important piece of work, and it is really going to help us. It's really going to help us with our strategic workforce planning, our training, our learning offerings, and we're launching the strategic workforce planning next month, straight after hopefully signing this off today. And it's really going to help us navigate that and be more strategic in that approach. So I think it's great. It's a really good piece of work that the workforce have all been involved in putting forward ideas and feedback. And yeah, it's going to give us that blueprint and that future cast for the future. So yeah, really excited about it and fantastic piece of work.
Thank you, SJ. Well, I think two of my favourite Welsh words in order, bendigedig and llongyfarchiadau. So well done, and congratulations to the whole team on producing an excellent piece of work. And as I say, we need to make sure that it's a live strategy and it's a living document. And I think coming back to it at regular intervals makes all sorts of sense, as we've discussed. So we are being asked to approve the strategy as Ivan has introduced to us, and from what people have said, I'm sure that was going to be a foregone conclusion. So thank you very much, Ivan. And we now have a long-term strategy, which is always a good place to be. If I then move on to the next item 4.2, finance report, and invite Claire, Executive Director of Finance, to introduce the this item. Claire, over to you.
Diolch yn fawr, bore da. Thank you, everyone. Good morning. I'm going to take you through, obviously, the finance performance update. Hannah, if you move us on to the next slide. And I'm going to cover 4 key areas, really. I'm going to give you the update of where our financial performance is at the end of February. I'm going to give you a bit of a timetable on where we'll be in terms of our annual accounts and publication of our annual accounts. I'm going to touch on our forward outlook for the next financial year. And then I'm going to finally touch on a couple of risks and opportunities that then creates. So if you move on to the next slide. Obviously, I'm going to talk about our financial position as at the end of February. It's important to note we have really 3 key areas of funding streams, and the report reflects that as we go through it. Key to that, obviously, is the core funding, which includes SLA and also our GMS budget funding. We've got our COVID-19 response, and then finally I'll touch on our discretionary digital spend, which is our digital priorities investment fund, which comes from Welsh Government. So if you move us on to the next 2 slides, just to summarise then, obviously we're heading towards the busiest quarter of our, from a financial perspective, with quite a high number of activities in and around our digital priorities investment fund, some of our key funds, and you'll see that in our run rate. But equally, we are moving ahead with the transition to our second new data centre, and obviously a lot of that activity is falling in the last quarter, and you'll see that as we go through the financial position. In terms of our savings plan, I'll provide a detailed analysis of our savings plan. You'll see that we are exceeding our challenge plan, which was of 5 million, but we're also going to deliver a recurrent element to that, which I know our chair is always keen on, which represents about 2.2 million, which is about 45% of our total savings plan. The programme funding, as we go into the last quarter, is now fixed, so we are keen to deliver on our promises in the last quarter, but also to note, we are working on a number of plans, which includes the digital eye care transition. So we are working at what the cost implications are for this and putting in a business plan into Welsh Government. That is not part of our DPIF, and I'll touch on that later. We're also compiling a business plan in relation to the support around the NHS app. And again, that will transition into Q1 in terms of completion, but the finance teams are working on the cost implications of both of those. Our capital plans are going well, and you'll see that we are forecasting to complete them in time for the year end, and we've got all the necessary procurement and supplier deliveries and commissioning underway. I am going to talk a bit in detail on our 2024-25 allocation. Obviously, our funding streams are quite complex, and I'll talk you through where we got to with those. And also the impact on some of the changes in some of our planning assumptions, particularly around the Digital Priorities Investment Fund. And then I'll touch on a couple of the risks. So Hannah, if you move us on to the next slide. So to summarise then, we are confident we will deliver on our statutory requirements. Obviously, the team are in the last days of this financial year, our 3rd year, and we are quickly finalising our sort of year-end position, which gives me a little bit more comfort to be able to say that. From our statutory requirements, from a revenue position, we're slightly underspent in February, and it looks like we'll be more or less in line with that as we head towards the year end. Capital, we've stayed within our limits, and we are again looking to deliver that, and I'll show you the detailed breakdown of that as we go into it. Our public sector pay policy is ahead of where we need to be. And finally, in terms of our cash balances, they were a bit low in relation to our previous position. Those have improved, and we now have a cash balance, or at the end of February, it was around about 5 million. Obviously, we plan to try and end the year with a position of around about 2 million. Okay, if you move us on to the next slide. So I talked about the run rates. This shows our pay and non-pay run rates throughout the year. And as you can see, towards the end of the year, and particularly in March, there is a high level of non-pay, which is the light blue spend that we expect to see in the last month, and we are seeing that. That would mean that we would spend £162 million of revenue, and as you can see at the end of February, that was 146. What is influencing the last sort of month of the year? And that's really twofold. One of that is the programmes. So we've done quite a lot of work around the digital systems for patients and public. I've said that wrong, but for the app, and equally around some of the activity around DMTP, which is the medicine management, and also some of the disbursements around the NDR, which you're seeing come into play there. And also, we've also undertaken our investment in additional cybersecurity and also our data centre move. So those are influencing our run rates towards the end of the year. So if you move on to the next slide, I'll then show you what that looks like in terms of our individual directorates' performance. So This shows you our cumulative position as at the end of February. The dark blue are the ones that are underspend, and the red are the ones that are slightly overspent. You can see that strategy and engagement, where you've seen a lot of the vacancy positions being held and also being supported, is driving the underspend in relation to the position as at the end of February. We have redeployed some of those gains into other areas, but and those areas have been predominantly primary care and operations. Obviously, primary care, they've had the Choose Pharmacy shift into that directorate, which has influenced some of the spend there. And we've also been doing quite a lot of work to support the eye care and WCCIS programs to ensure that our planning assumptions going forward are correct. And also within operations, we've spent quite a bit of time, as reported to the board previously, supporting the data centre move, and that's really what's influencing quite a high level of the overspend in that area. Again, not unplanned, but not budgeted for within this financial year. Okay, if we move on to the next slide, and this will really highlight our financial challenge and our savings plans. So this breaks down our actual target and our actual performance against each of those. You'll see that we set ourselves an annual target just shy of 5 million, obviously dominated by pay efficiencies and vacancy factors. And as at the end of February, we expected to deliver 4.6. We'd actually delivered 7.2. And again, you can see the reason for the overshoot is predominantly around pay efficiencies and savings. And again, that was somewhat intentional to help drive and support some of the data centre move and also some of the eye care initiatives. But again, it shows the impact that that's having in terms of our savings potential. Okay, and like I said before, 2.2 million of that is recurrent and will therefore help us going into next year in terms of our overall savings target, which for next year is around about 1.5 million. Okay, if we move on, I'll show you the impact that we're having around COVID. And obviously, this is a time when the spring booster campaign has started with the new cohorts. So this shows us both from a TTP, but also from a vaccine perspective, the level of activity, which is heavily driven, certainly from a vaccine perspective, in and around the letters and the notifications around vaccine and the vaccine delivery. In February, we did see a significant increase from where we've been previously, again, and we're expecting that to continue in March. But again, all of that is budgeted for. Yeah, so good progress against that. To date, we'd spent 5.8 million against a budget of 7.4. So we'd look to spend about 0.6 in March, and that would mean that we would recover back to Welsh Government a £0.6 million spend profile. Okay, moving on then to the next slide, which showed us the progress against our Digital Priorities Investment Fund. So to date, we've recorded in the period just shy of £29 million worth of spend. We still have 4 million to spend in the last month. And those are dominated within big programs, which is the NDR. And again, this is somewhat reflected by disbursements to health boards. So the NDR enables health boards to undertake local initiatives, and obviously we fund those via the programme. The DMTP actually has come in lower than we expected, but actually that is due to some commercial outcomes, but also some rescheduled GP supplier training. WCCIS, again, is seeing quite a lot of activity. And again, and finally, maternity, which is really going into the discovery phase, so that really planning the activities over the next couple of years. So the Digital Priorities Investment Fund, again, in line with expectation, and we plan to cover most of that by the end of this financial year. Okay, so the next one then looks at, includes the Digital Priorities Investment Fund, but looks at our total capital plan performance. And again, here you'll see that to date, we've spent 16.4 million. We've got a further 1.4 million to spend in the last quarter. Dominated by the intensive care programme that we're undertaking, and it's being currently testing in AB. And again, the rest of those, certainly from an internal perspective, we expect to spend within the next month. Okay, so that really sort of covers the financial performance as at the end of February. And again, there is no significant deviation as we move into March, albeit, like I said, we're in the last sort of couple of days before we finalise our year-end position in March. So if you move to the next slide and then the next one after that, then Hannah, in terms of our year end, obviously last year we were heavily impacted by new audit requirements and also the IFRS 16 requirements. So this year we are looking to, together with Welsh Audit, ensure that we provide a set of accounts by Friday the 3rd of May and the audited accounts by the 15th of July. And if you go to our next slide, it really then highlights from our team's perspective, the process will now go through in the preparation, drafting, the review and approval and the submission of those accounts over the forthcoming months, so that we can, as a board, sign off those accounts, which will probably be now in July, through the July board. So again, we're working alongside our audit colleagues. We've met and already gone through an initial plan. We are now sort of finalising the position, and then we'll then go into the review and drafting of those submissions as per. And obviously the Audit and Assurance Committee will have full visibility of that through the normal process. So as we move on then, so that really covers this financial year and the formalities of coming to a final set of accounts. I thought it's important now that we really draft and start to look at the next financial year, as obviously in the next item we will go through the IMTP.
Claire, does it make sense to stop at this point and take any comments or questions on looking back, and then you can...
Yes, I think that's a...
Alistair.
Thanks, Claire. Really, really clear. Very, very good report at this point. And I think it behoves us to say again, what an excellent state of affairs to be able to say that you and the team are managing within budget and actually declaring a slight underspend. So the overview looks very good. Just a couple of questions. One of them is really about an apparent contradiction, which I'm sure is not. But just to clarify, one of your slides identifies the acceleration of recruitment, and the follow-up slide identifies the pay efficiencies. And I just wondered how those two things link up in real terms. If we're accelerating recruitment, is that because, but at the same time we're managing pay efficiencies? Is that because we are freezing recruitment in some areas whilst accelerating them in others? It'd be good if you could possibly unpick that. And I don't know if you have approximate numbers to hand, but it would be useful, I think, as a board, for us to understand how many employees we have now versus a year ago, as the driver, if you like, of a lot of those particular questions. Thanks, Claire.
Yeah, no. Really helpful and useful insights. So there is focus in two key areas. So in some areas, such as administration and support, we are looking at, and we scrutinise in far more detail across the directorates to ensure that we actually have a good benchmark and a good understanding in those support areas as to what we should be doing in terms of recruitment, in terms of a sense of recruitment, and also in light of automation, as in our previous conversation, as to how is an efficient and effective support arrangements around digital. So the non-direct elements of delivery of digital are areas that we would look and scrutinise most effectively, and we are actually looking at directorate support and benchmarking across the organisation. However, in critical digital deliveries, in areas such as API development, product support, we are actually taking a very different approach to that. This is an area that is very highly competitive within the market. We are certainly looking to be more front-footed on that. And in fact, we might even take a bit of a risk around over-recruiting in certain areas in order to ensure that our engine room for DHCW is fit and ready to deliver a product-based delivery. So it is a bit of a contradictory, actually, but it's really reflecting the areas of which we need to strengthen at DHCW and areas where we need to be more efficient, potentially. So it's really about getting the right balance, and supporting that process is we have a scrutiny panel which goes through every new recruitment process, and actually where there is a question around funding, it does come to weekly directors, and we have a weekly directorate agenda item that scrutinises all of this, and therefore we are trying to get the right balance, I think is true to say. That's where we're at the moment, Alistair.
And staff numbers?
Oh, so our staff numbers are up for 1,078 to over 1,208, which I think is, hold on a second, an increase of approximately 20%.
20%.
But I will, yeah.
Okay, thank.
So 1,078 to over 1,200.
Marion.
Diolch Cadeirydd, ac a diolch Claire am yr cyflwyniad clir iawn yna. Ga I droi at yr cyfrifon blynyddol, a da ni'n cofio llynedd, a mi gyfeirio chi at yr gofynion archwilio ychwanegol yr IFRS 16 enghraifft. A dwi'n cofio yn y pwyllgor archwilio llynedd, fe buon ni'n trafod gwersi oedd na i'w dysgu yn sgil y broses o adrodd a chyflwyno'r cyfrifon y llynedd. A'r cwestiwn oedd gen i rwan oedd i ba raddau mae'r gwersi na ddaru ni adnabod y llynedd yn lliwio'r broses o lunio'r cyfrifon eleni. Diolch.
Thank you, Marion, and you're right. We did focus quite a lot in this area as a result of the audit committee review as the end of the year account. So we've met with Welsh Audit team in January, and we are working closely with them. We've got better weekly or monthly meetings. At the moment they were monthly, but we're now moving, obviously, as the year end comes up, to more frequency. And we have put in far more visible escalation and reporting, so that if there are issues from either side, that we capture those and we escalate them more effectively than we probably did this time last year. So that's what we're doing at the moment in relation to that. And I'm going to go back and correct myself. Sorry, Alistair. It was 1,078 employees that we had versus 1,206, which is a 12% increase, not 20. So apologies. So yes, so I hope that the relationship we have with Welsh Audit Offices is working more efficiently and effectively. And I should also add on that one, actually, we met with HCIW as we had a joint finance team meeting recently, because as a smaller organisation, our ability to absorb such a high level of activity between us is challenging at this point in time. So we are collectively working together on some common issues, which again, I think should help in terms of our ability to deliver the audit requirement this year. Thank you.
I won't make my comment about needing to keep a close eye on the recurrent. Oh, I have made that comment, but we know it's because it was picked up by the auditors as well. So and I know it's
yes,
the front of your mind as well, Claire.
Yeah, and on my headstone probably as well with my other one.
No, VAT is going to be on your headstone, Claire. Right, shall we move on to the forward look now?
Yes, okay. So
thank you very much for that, Claire.
That's okay. Okay, so I'm now going to look forward to the next financial year. And if we move to the next slide, I thought first it's important to summarise some of the approach that we've taken and some of the financial pressures. I'm then going to go into a bit of detail on the next subsequent slides and talk about the makeup of our funding sources and the approach that we've taken and the allocation of those funding sources. And I'll try and keep those as hopefully as simple as possible. So as we acknowledged as a board through some of our board development sessions, we are seeing significant financial pressures, and we have done over the last couple of financial years. That's really reflected service growth. What we're actually seeing is the growth in the delivery of our services and the uptake of our services, and equally in the dependency of those services now in a more 24/7. The growth in the demand for our services is far greater than the growth in our underlying funding position. So inevitably trying to keep pace with that is challenging. And actually, I think given how we spread our fixed costs over that activity, we're doing exceptionally well, but it does give its challenges in terms of the volume of data growth. What we've also seen is changes in the digital market with consolidation around some of our suppliers, which is leading to increasing digital pressures, particularly around some of our licensing arrangements. And we are seeing some of those and have highlighted those to you as a board. We're also seeing that a number of digital initiatives are shifting from programs into delivery. And we've highlighted the importance of covering some of those program costs and also some of those sustainable costs going forward. And in particular for the forthcoming year, we've always highlighted the importance of funding the cancer program to enable it to complete a number, not all, a number of their priorities in terms of that program. We're not alone either when it comes to our exposure to energy costs. Running 2 data centres inevitably consumes a high level of energy. And we have again highlighted the impact of this not only last year, but going forward in terms of our ability to balance and the funding requirements necessary to do that. As a board, we've taken the view that cyber is essential, and we've underpinned a number of the cyber investments on a recurrent revenue basis. And again, we highlighted this to Welsh Government and the importance of this and of having the right toolkit to support cyber. And finally, we've also talked about the importance as we shift to a more product-based delivery, the importance of sustaining some of our key digital core services. And I think a good example of that is NIAS, where again, there's a requirement to currently revenue fund a system which is a fundamental essential in terms of digital delivery. So those are some of the key pressures, and we shared those with yourselves, but also with some of our key stakeholders over, including audit, but also including Welsh Government, and together with the FDU, the Financial Delivery Unit, through October and November and also in December. So if we move to the next slide, I'll then take you into what does that all mean then? Obviously, DHCW has quite a number of funding sources, and the table on the left really highlights those sources and what funding we've had this financial year. It also looks at what year, and we've also checked and worked with the FDU and Welsh Government to understand our working assumptions around future years, albeit the focus primarily, is true to say, is in the next financial annual year. So I just want to talk you through how we went through and substantiated the funding positions for each of those, if I may. So Welsh Government core funding and during November and December, if you remember, we had our funding letter in February. Actually, in December, we had our allocation acknowledged by Welsh Government. And in that allocation, unlike other organisations, but in line with health boards, the Welsh Government acknowledged our energy pressures, but they also acknowledged that we should receive a 3.67% increase. And that was consistent with health boards and trusts. So that was really helpful, and that was agreed in December and finally acknowledged through a formal letter in February. With primary care, together with Sam Hall and with Welsh Government, and given recent changes which will come on into the performance report within the market in relation to primary care service provision, Welsh Government worked really closely with us and has supported our planning assumptions for next year and incorporated that in our funding allocation. So you'll see with the Welsh Government primary care, there is a significant increase compared to last year in terms of our allocation. And that's really because they've considered and included the assumptions around consolidating our supplier base in our systems within primary care. Again, that was done in January and February and was really helpful, and again shows the greater collaboration we now have in our operational working arrangements with Sam Hall in position. Then we've spent the last 2-3 months meeting with each of the health boards and trusts. So together with the operational teams and with the financial teams, we have worked with the directors of digital, the deputy directors of finance, to ensure the understanding and the calculations in terms of the transparency in relation to our SLAs. Our SLAs are service level agreements with each health board. We also included in that conversation the forecast Microsoft cost positions, as the national organisations, we facilitate that payment. I'm happy to report that as a result of that conversations, and some of those were really fruitful in terms of insight and understanding, we have now agreed all our SLA positions with the health boards and trusts for the forthcoming financial year. Then with COVID-19, we worked again closely along with Welsh Government and alongside my colleague Sam Hall to understand the options and actions that we needed to take over the forthcoming year to further improve the vaccine functionality and efficiency, but also to look at the requirements around the track and trace functionality for Wales. And again, we came to an agreement and a joint planning assumptions around that, and were notified in February of our allocation. Finally then, in relation to the DPIF allocations, this is the Digital Priority Investment Fund. We had a planning assumption that assumed a £36 million allocation for the forthcoming year. Working closely with Welsh Government and knowing some of the efficiencies we could make, we reduced that to £33 million. But it wasn't until March that we were then given an allocation of £28 million with a reprofiling assumptions around some of our major programmes. Again, we've worked closely alongside Welsh Government to ensure that we've made the right priorities and assessed the quality impact assessments for any changes that we've made to all those programmes that were affected by the reduction in allocation for next year. So, what does all that mean? So it means that for DHCW, our revenue allocation for next year has grown from 162.6 million to 168 million. And again, we will use those allocations and apply them appropriately. And the table on the right really breaks that down in terms of how we've made those allocations going forward. Please note that at the bottom there is a savings target, and that's calculated as a percentage of our core, which is approximately 1.5 million for us going forward. And again, as part of our AMTP process, we've worked on what I would call short-term and longer-term plans, and the longer-term sustainability plan, which we'll come on to, I'm sure, as part of the discussions on the sustainable funding framework. That's where we really are this year going to focus and make it a financial priority to understand the cost opportunities and implications as a part of a move into a more product-based, cloud-based delivery model. So that really covers our source and applications of funds. I don't know whether we want to pause there or move on. Probably, shall I finish this section and then we'll take on the risks and opportunities, Simon?
I think so. Sorry, I was just doing a calculation of what that cost improvement savings target was. It was 2.59%, isn't it? So just yeah, okay. You know, well, Rydian wants to ask a question, so we'll take Rydian's question and then if no one else has any pressing, move on. Claire, keep going through. Rydian.
Thanks, Claire. I always like how clearly and simply you explain this, but even I'm going to struggle with something here with my maths. So just for clarity, please, the core funding we receive from Welsh Government is in the region between 54 million and 58 million. And the SLA over those years that are on the graph, and the SLAs, so this is the recharge money that Welsh Government give to the health boards that then they give to us, is in the region between 14 million and 18.8 million going forward. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes. Yes,
okay.
Rydian. So the top line is the core and the
Yeah,
fourth line
okay.
SLA.
Is there an economic argument to say that it'd be better if Welsh Government just gave the money directly to us rather than us invoice the health boards and then consume resources trying to get the money out of the health boards?
I think there's COVID taught us that where there is a core national project or program where there is a national uptake for that functionality, then centrally funding directly is the best option. Where you have products where there is a choice as to whether they take those products or not, then there is a question mark as to whether that should be centrally funded or should it be done through an SLA arrangement, so it's pay as you go. And so I think there is an opportunity to have something that is a national product and it's core funded and it's funded directly through a top slice, but there is always an option to where there is a choice around whether you take that system as to what the funding arrangements should be. The other question in this is, how do you provide assurance that DHCW provides those products and services efficiently and effectively? And the SLA process enables you to be challenged as to the effectiveness in which you do that. And I would argue that we demonstrate that efficiency and effectiveness, which is why they've all signed those off. I do think as part of the new operating model, defining the service we provide and whether they're national or local, and then aligning our funding assumption to that will improve the efficiency of the current arrangement.
I mean, that's a very comprehensive argument, Claire. Answer, Claire. Thank you, Chair. I'll just come back on that. Lessons learned from the CANIS funding. As you're aware, I'm leading cancer, and the CANIS SLAs over a period of 10 years where there was variable compliance to provide that funding. What methodology, what leverage do you have within Digital Healthcare Wales when, if, for example, an SLA wasn't honoured and a health board was using a product that then they weren't paying for?
So this is about collaboration, right? The penalties for non-payment. We don't have any non-payment of invoices or services currently. So going forward, I wouldn't accept if someone takes a service and doesn't pay for it, then I would use the All Wales escalation process to demonstrate the case that DHCW would put across that they should pay for it, and I would escalate that up through Welsh Government. Quite frankly, we haven't got to that position, and actually that I think demonstrates the work that the operational teams are currently doing, which shows the uptake and uses of our services and the value for money of those services and the alternatives costs that they would have to pay in order to source those. So so we haven't got there yet, and yeah, and it goes back to fundamentally being able to demonstrate the value we create by having the arguments and putting that case in front of them. I'm afraid.
Thanks.
Okay, Alistair.
Real quick one, and I'm sure it could be a long one, Claire, but just intended to ask quickly, the Digital Priority Investment Fund Welsh Government allocation falling off a cliff in the following year. Are you able to just very briefly unpack that?
So very briefly, I would say no. I can't really unpack it and be able to tell you what alternatives they are looking at in order to develop, to create a development fund for us going forward. And that's because I think we've got to help them develop it. I do think, as we've shown here, there is a difficulty with digital development where you only consider the program and not the long-term funding and the sustainability of the product that you offer. So we have to, through the new operating model, describe a way that says, if you're going to develop a product going forward, it's not a program, it's a product. And actually we need sustainable revenue or capital for this period of time to develop these resources to support that. But what we also need to be able to do, and it touches on what Ivan was saying earlier, is you would develop a product because it gives you a benefit and value to the system. So the other bit of work we have to do, Alistair, is really help articulate the choices that we have to make and the benefits and value those choices will bring. And I think that's the bit of work that together with Ivan and through the programs, we are really trying to demonstrate. And actually we need to demonstrate in two senses. One, when we want additional funding, but there's also choices now that we're having to make due to funding constraints. And it's really being able to articulate the impact those choices have on health and care delivery.
Yeah, I mean, this is very much part of the conversation around sustainable funding model, isn't it? And Ridian's first point is also part of that conversation, and that figure represents which you pointed out there, Alistair, in not the next financial year, the one after, recognises that a whole number of programs are coming to the end of their agreed funding period. But as has already been mentioned, for example, one of the ones in there is the app. Well, one assumes that there's going to have to be some funding for the app beyond the end of that financial year. So part of the conversation this year is what is the sustainable funding approach to things like the app, which are developed, will still need further development, but if you like, in our business as usual, so that conversation is and agreements on that are essential this year. Ivan, you wanted to come in. Then we'll move on.
Well, yeah. So briefly, we know that the DPIF as a discrete named fund is ending in March of next year. We don't know yet what is going to follow, and as Claire said, we need to and will be working closely with government about what follows that. DPIF was created in 2019. It's a 5-year-old fund, which is actually quite mature for a Welsh government funding scheme. And I speak as an ex-Welsh government employee. And the DPIF has also evolved quite a bit from what it was originally set up to be, which was very strongly focused on traditional programs. That is, a discipline around programs of things that were specifically targeted to transformation or to prioritize change that had a limited lifespan, where you'd bring in the programmatic structure as a temporary arrangement in order to get from one place to the next. But DPIF has expanded to fit things that are arguably not that transformational, like link and RISP and if you like, maintenance replacement or technology refresh cycles. And also it's tried to stretch against Welsh Government priorities into product-based ways of working that are quite different to a programmatic way of working, in that you build it and you then run it, and it goes live in stages using an iterative sort of approach. And the DSPP app is definitely in that space, and the National Data Resource has now just moved into that space as well, having gone live last August, and that is creating various tensions. So I think the uncertainty isn't helpful, and it's quite stark when we see it on a set of slides like this. But a review and a refresh of how DPIF works and supports the digital change across the system that we need is probably opportune, and we need to work very closely with Welsh Government to try to land that right over the next few months.
Okay, thank you, Ivan. Claire, moving us on.
Yeah, I'll move us on to my final slide, which talks about risks and opportunities. So again, currently the risks remain, and we're just talking about them there, isn't it? The program funding and how do we more effectively fund digital development going forward in the context of a product-based delivery. And the other bit for me is that we are still seeing digital inflation and increases, energy less so, it's truth be known, but actually our licensing pressures remain, and I think that will continue to be a risk for us going forward. I hate this bit because I know what Simon's going to ask me when I come to the end of it, but in terms of opportunities, sustainable funding, I think it's working alongside Welsh Government and providing them the insight of what we would need in order to have a sustainable product funded service going forward. We are working with that, and we are working as a team to really understand the cost implications of the new operating model, and we're working on that as we speak. The Microsoft VAT, we have met with our financial advisors, and there are now examples of English trusts where they do not charge VAT. So there is light at the end of the tunnel. We just don't have a decision. And we don't know when we're going to get that decision, even though it's gone to their committee. And then finding more value. So we'll probably touch on this a bit later, but we are looking at a transformational programme that is really building the future for DHCW and the future operating model. And within that, there is a section called Finding More Value, which is really how we as finance will look at the longer term sustainable model and funding requirements of that model to see how we can deliver recurrent savings and what is the expectation around the ability to deliver those recurrent savings given the backdrop that we're currently operating on. So we are spending a bit of time looking at finding more value, and hopefully that will inform Welsh Audit Office, but also the board, more importantly, on what are the choices and what are the implications of what our new operating model will look like. So quite a lot of work going on within the finance team. So the final slide really would help if we move on to the final slide, Hannah, is really what I'd like you to do is note our financial position and our drive to deliver on all our financial requirements, statutory requirements for this financial year. To note that we are working closely with Welsh Audit Office to deliver an annual set of accounts, and to note the challenging but also our financial outlook for the IMTP period and assumptions. And finally, I just wanted to thank my finance team who've worked extremely hard over the last month, particularly when we thought we were nearly there and then had to do quite a lot of rework in terms of finalising the IMTP financial plan, but also the hard work that they're working with the directorates to land our financial position for this financial year. So thank you, Chair, and happy to take more questions.
Thank you, Claire. Alistair and then David.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Really quick one. I just wanted to pay credit to the team and to Claire for consistently building in opportunities as part of what you focus on, and I would really like to see that in all our departments. I think it does become cultural, and it's very, very easy in very difficult times. And when do we not work in difficult times? These last few years, to focus on risk. I just pay credit to you, Claire, and the team for that. But thank you,
David.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Claire. I'd also echo Alistair's comments, Claire, about the great job that you're doing and the clarity of the presentation you've given us. I just have one question. It's around the sustainable funding model. We have some external consultants helping us with that at the moment. I just wondered if you could give us an update on when we might see something back from that piece of work.
Let's take Marilyn's question as well, and I'll come back to you then, Claire. Go, Marilyn. Ooh, can't hear you, Marilyn, but you don't appear to be on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, right, okay. All right. I just when you talked, Claire, about the DPIP funding going and having the new whatever funding arrangement as working with the Welsh Assembly government to come up with something new. Any ideas of what that might look like? I was thinking to give us that idea of, would it be us jointly doing it, or do we have to sort of go to them with it, or do you think it will automatically be us working together to form that?
Can I add to that? Because in a sense, Marilyn and David are asking the same area of question and making the same point that I wanted to do, which is that you put the financial under the financial opportunities, you put sustainable funding models. I'd also have them in the bit above, because I think it's probably one of our key risks this year. If it's not achieved, then we've got some serious issues, haven't we? And the thing that makes me most nervous is about the pace at which government can move and does move and experience in the past, and moving on something which is pretty major, really, in terms of our funding and indeed wider digital development.
Yeah, no,
Go on, Claire.
I wouldn't. So the first one is yes. when are we going to have an idea of what the future operating model will cost us? So I would say it's probably still got another 6 weeks of work to do that piece of work. And the reason, I think we know we've got a great understanding of what our current product cost. And we've got an understanding of where we want to go to in terms of a cloud-based delivery model and what that enterprise architecture sort of looks like. The key bit is the critical path to deliver it. And that's the bit of work that we're working on at the moment, which basically says, at what point what are the trigger points as to when we exit a data center, or when do we switch to a product, and when do we move to modern architecture? And once we've got that, we can work out the transition to the new operating model and the cost implications of what that would be. And that's the bit that's actually going to take us a bit of time to do, and to do it right, because we've got that critical milestone path that we're working closely with. So that's the bit of work that we're doing. And actually, it's really been helpful to get us to think out of the day-to-day and into the more longer term financial strategic thinking. And that echoes where Welsh Government thinking is, and why it's taken us a long time to get to the longer term plan, is because we're so consumed by what we need to do to secure next year, and our energy is securing and prioritizing and making the right choices for next year. We now need to flip that emphasis to the longer term strategic financial plan. And I think the work that we're doing, and when we've completed that, would help inform that. And where do I want to go with it? If you looked at those boxes, what you're seeing is a reduction in our discretion. I'm calling it discretionary because it's a choice on our digital plan, and an increase in our core funding, albeit there's a lot of boxes and it's quite complicated. What I think we have to do as part of that process is define what is core digital services that DHCW provide, and what are the choices in terms of the development and the timing of that development. So I think we have to look at, how do we transition to a new operating model? What's the duration of that? What's the cost of that? And then when you get there, what are the things that we should be doing and as the engine room for digital, and what are the funded choices around that? So we've still got a bit of work to do, but it is become, I think as a collective, we're becoming clearer of what that looks like. The question will be then is, can we afford it? And can Welsh Government afford it? And that goes then to the value bit that says you can't afford not to. And our job is also to demonstrate the value and impact we have by doing those activities. So I think, given it's year end, it's probably be July and August that we'll come up for air and be able to really articulate that to the board in a way that I hope will bring all of those pieces together. Thank you, Chair. Okay,
Thank you very much, Claire. I don't see anyone else, any other hands. So what we'll take a short break now, a 10-minute break. It's 11:30, so we'll come back at 22 midday. Please turn your cameras off and put on mute, and I'll see you a few seconds before 22. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. There's a couple of stragglers, but we'll crack on. Okay, if we move to the next item on the agenda, item 4.3, and very helpfully, I think having the finance report prior to this will obviously inform some of the conversation around the IMTP, and I'll invite Ivan Evans, the Executive Director of Strategy, to introduce this item. Over to you, Ivan.
Thank you very much, Simon. So we've only got 20 minutes for this item, and as you would have picked up from previous discussions, this is quite a chunky one. So I'm going to try and get through quite quickly so that we can have questions and answers on it in quite a structured way. So first, what I'm asking the board to do is to approve the IMTP as presented to you today for submission to Welsh Government, and the due date for submission to Welsh Government is today because of the bank holiday weekend. And I'm seeking to provide you with assurance on 3 different things. One is that the IMTP as presented to you today is deliverable within our resources, meeting our first statutory duty. And that follows directly on from the finance update and report that Claire has just given you. The second is that the IMTP as presented today is aligned to our strategic objectives as an organisation and our statutory functions, what it is that we're set up to do, etc., so that we're discharging our duties. And I think that refers back to the strategy that we approved earlier on in the meeting in terms of that alignment. And thirdly, that the IMTP is supported by control processes and transparency and other things that can cope with the changes that we always need to make during the year and the reporting and the monitoring of our delivery against the IMTP as we have set that out. It's a 3-year IMTP, but the focus is very much on the first year, and that is a clear steer we've had from Welsh Government in their requests of us and of all of the other organisations. So you can see the 3-year impact, and we mentioned the DPIF impact just earlier on, but most of our conversation today, I think, will probably be on the next year that we have ahead of us. You're familiar with the process of how we develop our IMTP and also how we manage delivery against our IMTP, and you'll also know that we've refined that process quite a lot over the last couple of years. We've tightened up the document itself. We've tightened up the reporting against milestones. We've tightened up the way that is presented to you. We've tightened up the way that we plan the resources through the organisation. And so the structure, we've held to that structure for the IMTP. In fact, it's slightly shorter even than last year's at 64 pages this year. And I want to pay credit to all the teams for the work that goes into that to that process. It's in the cover paper, but it starts in November. Board members are engaged with that through their development sessions. Teams work very, very intensively, hundreds and hundreds of people across our own organisation, matching our intent to the resources that are required and confirming that they're available and building them into work plans. And also beyond our organisation in terms of lining up our delivery with our delivery partners, because there's an interdependence between what we put in our national programmes, particularly, and our national services with what health boards need to do. So it's quite a tightly intersected and quite a complex exercise. And I just want you to hold on to that. And then as we go through the year, there are always changes. And sometimes those changes are contextual ones. Sometimes they're new priorities. Sometimes they're responding to events in our supply chain or in our delivery chain. Sometimes they're because, as happened last year, Welsh Government is asking us to trim back on some of the funding to meet other priorities elsewhere. We manage that through change controls against those milestones. We have a system that we built ourselves called Manage My Milestones. Michelle Sell, who's familiar to you all, chairs the programs and priorities, the planning and programs management group at PPMG. And so we track those through and we report them monthly to our management board, and we report them up to the board periodically as well. So I want to be able to, I am giving you my assurance that I am confident in both the development process that we have and the management process. And I don't, and there's no intention to change it or to introduce new additional or substitute processes. We have regular processes well established that our organisation is familiar with using. However, there is, as you will see in the paper, we plan against anticipated levels of funding because that process starts before Christmas. And the anticipated levels of funding have not been realised. And at the end, during February, the end of February and early March, we were in discussions with Welsh Government about the final position on the Digital Priorities Investment Fund, and that came out significantly lower than what we had anticipated at the end of our process. We've reflected that in the IMTP, and particularly we've reflected that in using the system that we introduced last year, which flags certain roadmaps in our milestones, certain delivery roadmaps as yellow when there's a degree of uncertainty about our resource commitment to them. And that might be that the funding isn't available, or we've not worked the funding through into detailed resource plans and interdependencies between teams, or because there are late changes, and therefore we need to go back and review them. So there's a degree of uncertainty, and we can't give you 100% confidence that we are for sure going to develop this. It is still our ambition to develop these, to deliver those things that are yellow, but we have to work harder to clarify exactly how it is that we're going to do that. And you can see that reflected in the IMTP. So I'm just emphasizing that yellow does not mean we're not going to do it. Yellow means that we want to do it, but we need to work out carefully how we do it and the extent to which we do it, given the resources that we have available. So there's a little bit more yellow in this year's IMTP presented in front of you today than there would have been in last year's IMTP, or that we would have anticipated, and particularly in certain programs, medicines, NDR, and maternity, that reflects the impact of the lower than anticipated changes. So in the paper again, I said what will happen next. So as I said, there won't be a new process. We will use the regular arrangements that we have. We'll use the machinery that we have to manage delivery, and that means that each of those programs, particularly the ones most affected, during the next few weeks in April, will go through a full review of their priorities, which they need to submit through two parallel lines of governance. One is to the program board, and secondly is through the PPMG process, and those need to run alongside each other. Program boards have got a responsibility for what happens within the program space, but that forms part of what happens across the whole of the DHCW portfolio and is reflected in the IMTP. That's going to take some time to work through. It would have been nice if we'd been able to do that before confirming the draft IMTP or the IMTP to be submitted to Welsh Government, but time didn't allow that. We can't do that complexity of work in 2 to 3 weeks for reasons which I think you'll understand, knowing how our processes work. But we will run through those more quickly. Usually in our IMTP, the change control process starts to bite at the kind of half-year point and the end of the third quarter point, not in months 1 and 2. But this year we're going to have to really spin the wheels quite quickly on change controls in certain areas in months 1 and 2, and then bring back those reports and updates to yourselves. But again, I'm emphasizing through our regular processes, through our established governance, with which you and our teams and our whole organization is familiar. So we're not doing something which is different. So I've tried to go through quite quickly there, and would invite questions on it. The IMTP as a whole, as a document, is there for you to read. I think, again, it's familiar and in structure, and in the way that it's organized and the way that it's presented to you. And I know that board members previously have commented that they find it helpful that it is presented in that way after the refinements we introduced about 1.5 years ago. So I'm sure it will highlight a number of things that the board members will want to ask questions on. So I and other members of the exec team and us collectively can respond to those over the next 15 minutes or so.
Thank you, Ivan. I mean, as you very helpfully pointed out, I mean, we need to approve an IMTP. We need to approve a balanced IMTP, which is what we have in front of us. But as you've also helpfully pointed out, it clearly identifies those areas that we expected or would wished very much to do work in, that as we sit here at the moment, we can't. And as you again pointed out, the board will need to reflect on that once we're certain of exactly where we are in the context of what things we can and can't do that we might otherwise have wanted to do. And as you say, that will come through to the board in through the normal channels. Ruth, you want to come in?
Thanks, Simon. Diolch, Ivan. I think the IMTP has really developed, particularly in the last couple of years, and what we see before us today is a result of all of that work. I think it's probably just worth reiterating that it feels like a crazy sign-off timetable that we're presenting something at the board today that we have to submit today, but actually I feel like as a board we've been much more involved in developing this. We've had many occasions on which to comment and send back our comments, so we're not in a position whereby today you would be expecting a load of things for the board to say we're not going to sign this, we're not going to sign this off. I really like the way that we now show things with the blue and the yellow. And I think my reflection on that would be, as well as yellow shows there's resource and funding uncertainty, I'd like to think that it shows that we're perhaps a little bit more realistic as we've matured as an organisation. That we've always had loads and loads of stuff in IMTPs that we haven't been able to deliver. And I think we've got to the stage now where we're actually being able to call some of that out. We're going to have to make difficult decisions over the next year. And for us to have highlighted some of that before we even start to say these are the areas that we're uncertain around, I think is just a massive step forward for us. So, you know, no questions from me, because I feel very well informed on the IMTP, and I think this is a really good place for us to be in. So diolch, and thanks to the team for that.
Thanks, Ruth. Marion.
Diolch, Cadeirydd. Yeah, I'd support Ruth's comments. It is very, very clear, but clear also that there is a lot of uncertainty, as you rightly pointed out, Ivan, about the level of spend and investment that we will be able to do in parts of our core activities and above. I guess my question is about assurance that we are going to be effectively engaging with our stakeholders to ensure that they're very, very clear as well on what we are finding it difficult to commit to currently. We are often criticised in terms of our inability to invest and to collaborate effectively with some of our digital colleagues within our wider NHS space. So it's just getting clarity on the engagement process to ensure that we're all on the same page and that our health board partners are fully appraised of the challenges that we face. Yeah.
I'll pick that up, Ivan.
Yeah, certainly. Obviously Welsh Government is a key stakeholder in this, and other NHS organisations are very, very important delivery partners and stakeholders for us, and they will be they'll be primed and ready to understand the pressures that we are under, because the pressures, the financial pressures particularly, that we're under are the same ones that the rest of the NHS system is under, and all the yellow in our IMTP is in part a symptom of that system-wide pressure and constraint on resources that all the finance directors and all the digital directors and all the other peer groups will be familiar with. We work hard on our stakeholder engagement, and we've dialed that up over the last couple of years, and I know the board is really interested in that, and the board takes a regular 6-monthly update on where we are with our stakeholder engagement. We're undertaking a review of that to validate independently, slightly behind schedule because we were unable to, we weren't successful in appointing a contractor when we first went out to tender on that, and that will give wider assurance. But I know that, you know, I am through the Digital Directors Network, and Claire through the Finance Directors Network, and Helen through the Chief Executives Network, and Ridian through the Medical Directors Network. You know, we are engaging for people to understand the position that we're in, and we share our IMTP with them, and we align it with the digital parts of their IMTP. So we work really hard on those things. However, you know, some of these changes have happened, you know, weeks back. Digital directors are aware of the change in the DPIF. They also receive some funding from the Digital Priorities Investment Fund. And there's a digital directors meeting coming up, I think in a week and a half, where I'm sure it will be a hot topic of discussion again.
Claire.
I just want to echo that. I think what I've seen this year is a maturity in the relationships that we now have with our key stakeholders. So I'll give you an example. The conversations that Sam Hall and her team are having around the vaccine, that, you know, looks at options, it's considered, and the timeliness of that decision and the incorporation of those into our planning assumptions and letters was really helpful. And again, the primary care conversations with the GMS budget around, you know, the understanding the implications for the next year and actually being on the front foot in terms of the funding requirements and how that then is built into our planning assumptions and funding, I think shows a bit more maturity in that relationship now. I suppose I echo that the timing around the DPIF was a bit disruptive within the planning framework. But it's about reprofiling around the programmes and how we work again with our stakeholders to optimise that. And that was underpinned by some great work again with, Ivan and the team around the quality impact assessments around some of those decisions. So this is, you know, we're in financially challenging times. Our role within that digital system is to help facilitate the right decisions with the limited funding we've got. And it also is to, along with our strategy, I think, to start formulating what is going to be the commitment of Welsh Government going forward around funding digital and the role it plays in transforming the NHS, as others nationally are picking up on the role that digital can play and actually underpinning that message with a significant funding allocation. So I think this year we've shown through the IMTP that greater alignment with the structures that Helen developed in our boards and with the resources and leadership that those structures are now showing, and we can build on that going forward. I think where there's uncertainty, it's really about how we help facilitate the decisions around that uncertainty so we maximise the benefit and potentially the allocation to DHCW within that. And again, our relationships with directors of digital, directors of finance, directors of planning, and also the directors of workforce and OD and also in primary care have all really come into the fore now about that trusted relationship around the options and what we're putting on the table. And we've got to build on that going forward, really.
Thank you, Claire. Just one thing to add from myself. I mean, Helen and I have been discussing this, and at some point, I think it will be appropriate, and we're talking about communicating with stakeholders, for me to set out exactly the implications of where we end up in terms of funding, because as we sit here, there's some key programs which have ministerial priority attached to them as well that we are not able to proceed with. And I think once we've got final clarification on that, it would make sense for me to write to the minister and set out very clearly exactly what the implications are of our funding settlement and decisions we have had to make in the context of, and what program boards have decided and considered about what they can and can't do in within the financial envelope they have. So I will be doing that. It's not a today letter because we're still working through some things, as Ivan explained, but I think it is an imminent correspondence because, you know, I think as a board, I need to ensure that we communicate very clearly why we are not able to do certain things that we would otherwise have wanted to do and have been identified as priorities. I think that's fair to say, isn't it, Helen, that captures our conversation around what I should do as chair in these circumstances.
Yeah, no, fully kind of support that approach, Chair. I think that we're in the fortunate position of being able to have a balanced plan that's before the board today. And I think that there is no kind of reason for me to write an accountable officer letter in that vein. And there's quite a lot of ambition within the plan, and there's quite a lot that we are doing and a lot more that we want to do. And I think that it's a sentiment that's shared, as Ivan and Claire said, right across the board, really, in terms of the challenging financial context that we're operating within at the moment. So it does come down to choices. And I guess, and some of those choices, you know, well, all choices have consequences, don't they? So we need clarity on what that means in the round and work with our stakeholders and Welsh Government in terms of, you know, how we explore further opportunities, as I said earlier, in terms of additional funding, or that we are clear about what the things that are not going to be delivered for the system. And it's, you know, that's the state of play, really, isn't it, in terms of where we find ourselves. So I think that probably would be really helpful in terms of clarifying that position when we've got the detail really through the programme governance arrangements, and you know, all of our stakeholders will be aware then. So I think that would be helpful, Chair.
Okay, thank you. No one else. So thank you, Ivan. So the board have been asked to approve the IMTP that we have in front of us. It's the envelope has got the stamp on it, and it'll be in before the meeting has ended. Okay, thank you very much. If we move on then to Item 4.4, the Strategic Equality Plan update, and I'm going to invite Sarah Jane, Director of People and OD, to introduce this item. Hi, Sarah. Sarah Jane.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. I'm delighted to be invited to provide an update. So I just want to pull out a couple of things really and invite questions. Firstly, a special thank you to Lanisha Wright, who's our EDI Equality, Diversity and Inclusion lead. She's doing some great work. The membership of the network, the EDI network, is growing, really starting to make an impact, which is great. And it was a year ago, in March last year, we launched the Strategic Equality Plan following the board sign-off, which was great. We're now working quite a lot across NHS Wales, bringing in best practice, but also sharing our sort of homegrown initiatives and successes too. So that's absolutely amazing. And our EDI lead is also going to be chairing the Staff Recognition Awards this year, with values at the heart of everything. So really looking at recognising great teamwork and support. So that's a really good indicator of how we're leading that piece. We've done a number of things really. So there's quite a lot of stuff in the paper. So I'm going to just bring out a few things. The Emerging Talent Development Programme launched earlier this month for bands 3 to 5. So that's been a really good initiative, and that's supported that we had about 156, 158, I think it's at one point for that whole day event, which was really good. And Chris Darling and I helped devise that and develop that, and it was really supported. And Sam Hall was one of the key speakers as well, and that was really well received. We're working really hard to consider maintaining our certificate for the BS 76000, the value in people, which we achieved last year. So that's an iterative piece. We're continuously looking and supporting and involving our sort of development of that. But also achieving the certification of the ISO 3415, which is diversity and inclusion, which we've been awarded, which is a new standard, and that's a great accolade for the organisation. And just a couple of shout outs from the last quarter really. We've done a number of 10 talks, Black history, menopause, neurodiversity, the equality impact assessments, again, embedding that into practice, and anti-bullying commitments as well. So some really diverse stuff there, which has been well attended by members of the workforce and supported by independent members as well, including Marilyn, our diversity champion on the board. And we also had an international women's event, which was hosted by our own Claire Osmondson-Little, and again Marilyn was one of the key speakers on that International Women's Day, and again that was very well attended. There were some really good speakers and lots of information exchange and enthusiasm to that as well. So just a couple of things. So the health and well-being we talked about a little bit earlier on in the high level staff survey. Information has been received, and we're now drilling down into the analysis of that. But the health and wellbeing agenda is very closely linked to the equality, diversity and inclusion, the strategic equality plan. So we will be using a number of initiatives to work forward with that, to make sure that we're supporting people to work smarter, supporting individuals, supporting our team, supporting each other, to make some small but consistent changes that really are going to make a difference to people's work. And finally, just a bit of a mention really that we're going to be starting the transformation programme. Culture transformation is a critical part of that, with people at its heart, and that will be driving forward our values, our behaviours, our teamwork, reducing silo working, single points of failure, and really sort of showcasing how we can work better together, more flexibly, and recognising that sort of support aligned with our development programme in digital, technical, but also leadership development and talent as well, running alongside. So lots of activities going on. Big thanks to everybody, including all my colleagues and the Chief Executive, for all their support during the year for various different initiatives and 10 talks and a number of different events as well. It's been a really good team effort, and indeed my team as well. So thank you very much for bringing the paper today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Sarah Jane. I've got a few hands going up. Helen and Ruth. Then Ruth, Helen.
Thank you, Sarah Jane. Mine was a question on the All Wales NHS Staff Network. Can you expand a bit on what that is?
Yes, it's most organisations, if not all organisations, have got a focused individual or a team looking after equality, diversity and inclusion. So it's very much looking at the NHS Wales, and I think it might also include some public sector organisations to look at best practice, sharing some of the concerns and barriers, and actually we've taken some of our homegrown initiatives and successes, but also bringing back a little bit of best practice and new thinking and incorporating that into some of the things that we're developing for this year, really. So it's been a really good exercise, but there's going to be a big day that's going to be held. I think it's in May, which a number of people will attend. But again, it's just really putting equality, inclusion, diversity, values, behaviours really at the forefront at how we drive our organisations forward and support people better, each other, our customers, our patients, and in that sort of team focus. So yeah, loads of things going on, and it's really great that this has got a bit of a national focus as well. So really good stuff going on in that arena.
And if I may, Simon, just one.
Yeah, far away.
And just to say, really, the EDI role that I can see there's down as an escalation. Clearly, we've agreed that as part of the new people and OD structures to move that forward onto a more substantive footing. So hopefully that will provide some of that kind of sustainable support for the good work that's going on in this area. Just to share that with the board. Thanks.
Ruth, and then Marilyn.
Thanks, SJ. I thought it was a really helpful, really clear update. So echo your thanks to your team for pulling that together. Given that we've just signed up today to the corporate parenting charter, you might not have done the thinking on this yet, but have you thought about the opportunities for our EDI strategy to support our role as a corporate parent? Particularly, there must be lots of opportunities in growing our own pipeline, apprenticeships and the like. So I just wondered if you could comment on that, please.
Delighted to. Let's take Marilyn, and then Sam Lloyd wants to come in and wrap up all three questions, comments. Sarah Jane, easier that way. Marilyn, over to you.
Well, mine was a bit of a comment, really, just to Chuck and Bar, thank you very much, Ashley, and all your team for all the work you've done around equality, diversity, inclusion, and well-being as well. And thank you very much. I'm really pleased, Helen, about you mentioning about the role being extended. I think that I've been heavily involved with SJ and her team, and I think that there's been a commitment by DHCW to putting equality, diversity and inclusion at the heart of what we do and the way we work. And so by actually looking and securing that post, I feel there's a demonstration by the organisation of taking it seriously and making sure that, in the future, we can just continue to look at things in this way and make sure that when there's gaps that we look at them and we fulfill them. And I just wanted to say that, really, and I recognise all the hard work that Lanisha have done as well, in particular in her role, and as I said, in Sarah Jane, and just trying to keep everything afloat from an organisational point of view as well. So just want to say that. So thank you.
And just if I can add to that, Sarah Jane, before bringing Sam Lloyd in, and I know this is something Marilyn and I have discussed, is that we need keep a close eye on the resource that is in that, Lanisha's, well, it's hard to call it a team, Lanisha, but keeping a close eye on the amount of resource we have there, because it's an internal issue for us, but it's also a hugely important issue for recruitment and opening up recruitment markets, for want of a better word, that we currently don't reach as well as perhaps we might. So let's just keep a close eye on that resource and ensuring that it's not overstretched and something that we might need to address into the future. Sam Lloyd, and then Andrew, and then I will come back to you, Sarah, to pick up on the questions.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, Sarah Jane. You alluded to the organisational change programme in your update and the fact that people development is at the heart of that. People are often made nervous by change, aren't they? But I think many of the commitments in the People and OD strategy are the reasons that we're actually doing the organisational transformation programme. So things like making it a great organisation to work, strategic workforce planning, growing our own talent, looking at new ways of working, driving engagement. Those are all the kind of underpinning principles that are driving the organisational change programme. So I just wanted to reiterate that I think it's a really positive thing for the organisation, and I think for our staff as well. And I also think through strategic approaches to recruitment, we can really use it to drive the diversity agenda as well. So, yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Sam. And Andrew.
It was just really a comment just to say really well done, everyone. I work quite closely with Anisha as well. And we look at things like equality impact assessments and things like that, our day-to-day responsibilities in the organisation. So it was just a well done for me, really, just that comment, and we'll continue to all work together.
Great. Sarah Jane, do you want to obviously come back on the corporate parenting question that Ruth had, and anything else you want to add?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for all that feedback. And I'll share that with Anisha and the team. Yeah, absolutely. I think a really good question, Ruth. And it is quite hot off the press, this one, isn't it? It was going to be signed off today, which is great. But I did notify the team last week to say that expectation is that we're going to sign this off. And we are looking at that in terms of how we're developing our apprentices pipeline, which is, as you mentioned. So we're going to have a key focus 24-25 on veterans, people with disabilities, and the parenting charter as well, and look at how we can make some links into that across Wales. I mean, I think it's incredible, and I'm really up for it, really. So I think we can really do something to be trailblazers in that space and really celebrate that. It'd be great next year if we can maybe hear from somebody that has benefited from that opportunity. So yeah, delighted. And it is in the thinking. It isn't in the paper, because obviously the paper was prepared a little bit earlier. But hopefully when I give the 6-monthly update, we'll have some information exchange, and I'll be really keen to maybe showcase that at some point in the future as well. Thank you, Ruth, for the question.
Thank you, Sarah Jane. And as you know, I always think just been asked to note something which is so important, in which so much work has gone, never seems like it gives it proper justification. But Sarah Jane, please take the board's appreciation and congratulations for the work back to the team, back to Lanisha in particular, obviously, and I'm sure everyone will note the report and note it with pleasure. Thank you. If we move then on to the item 4.5, the digital inclusion update, which, as Helen knows, is something close to my heart and needs to be close to the heart of all of our work within DHCW. And I'm going to ask Helen to introduce this update. Helen, over to you.
Thank you, Simon. Yeah, I'm absolutely delighted actually to have the opportunity to update you on the work that we're doing in the organisation on digital inclusion. Yeah, absolutely, very much aware it's one close to your heart, Simon, close to mine too, which is why I'm really proud to be the exec lead for that in the organisation. So just a little bit of background and reminder, really. Colleagues will recall that we signed the Digital Inclusion Charter for Wales back in September 2022, when we did that summit with third sector colleagues, and we've been working up our action plan in response to that, and established the Digital Inclusion Working Group a few months ago now, back in 2023. And I just want to take the opportunity to thank members of the Digital Inclusion Working Group for the time and effort that they've put into this agenda. I particularly want to call out Nadine Payne, our Head of Engagement, Joe Dundon, who leads on the public and patient engagement for us, and Sarah Brooks and Sarah Jane's team in terms of the work that they've been doing in this space. And in terms of developing the action plan and really focusing in on those kind of key themes around embedding digital inclusion in DHCW and really understanding what that means and how we support communities, patients and the public, and ensure everything we do is accessible. And then also a big one for us, I think, linked back to a question from the earlier discussion around the parenting charter, which I'm really pleased that we've approved today. And I think that we have a real opportunity to make an impact in that space as an organisation. So that developing future skills, I think, is a really important element of this for us. And of course, everything that we do is about working in partnership. So what I thought I'd do, colleagues, is just pick out kind of a highlight from each of those themes, really, in terms of the work that we've been doing. And I'm really pleased to say in the first one, embedding digital inclusion across DHCW, we've secured the Digital Inclusion Charter accreditation. So that happened at the end of 2023, so that we were able to evidence the actions that we're taking to in response to the pledges that we've made in the charter. So really pleased that we've got the accreditation, and had some great feedback from Compass, and who we have been working quite closely with on that agenda. So great to see that. But I guess that's still just the beginning of the work for us as an organisation. So it's good that we are really understanding what digital inclusion means to us. And it's great that we're understanding what it is that we then need to do to actually ensure that we are having a positive impact in the opportunity that we have as a national digital organisation to ensure that we are being very inclusive in everything that we are doing in the digital space. In terms of the empowering community, so the community projects initiative, colleagues will recall we've been doing a bit of a pilot where we've been providing our staff with the opportunity to take 2 days of their time to support a community initiative, and we were really keen to see a focus on those activities being targeted at digital inclusion. So there's quite a lot of good work that's been going on in that space, and we'll bring back, once we've evaluated that pilot that's been going on over the last few months, we'll bring back an update to a future board meeting so that we can share that with you. But there have been colleagues have shared some of this in blogs, and it's been great to see that work, and actually there's interest from other organisations in terms of providing that opportunity for our staff, because I think it's a mutually beneficial endeavour, and hopefully that's what the evaluation will set out for us. Another area in terms of the empowering patients and public is the drive on developing digital champions. So we've been working with colleagues through with Compass in terms of their training to become a digital champion, and we have a number of those in the organisation. So I think we will want a number more in the organisation, actually, and probably it's something that we in the digital inclusion working group think that we would want to, all of us, actually undertake the training and become a digital champion. As a board, we might want to think about whether that's a challenge we'd like to kind of take up, but we'll have a conversation about that more during the year. But great to see that, that support out there. And what does that mean in terms of us getting out and about in our communities to ensure that we have, we're supporting everyone to get on board with things like the NHS Wales app, which I know has been happening in recent times. And then in terms of empowering patients and the public, we've got a resource centre on the Digital Services for Patients and the Public webpage, so that we can pull all of those case studies together so that we've got all of the materials that support people. And then there's quite a lot of work that we're doing in the accessibility space around standards. And this really directly links with the huge emphasis that we are placing moving forward on user-centered design as an organisation. And we've got a UCD working group that's been established. And I was really pleased to have the opportunity to hear from Rachel in Sam's team. Sam is our exec lead for user-centered design. So it was great to hear from Rachel and a couple of members of the working group, who I think are more of a coalition of the willing, because I think we've got over 30 people now across the organisation who've joined the working group. We're really setting out what that roadmap to really embrace and user-centered design is in the organisation, how we make that work effectively, and also how do we ensure that we've got all of the standards around accessibility consistent right throughout the organisation, and ensuring that we are adhering to all of those standards as they're set, and understanding where we've got any gaps really that we need to fill and learn from others. And I mentioned the digital champions, so we've got over 60 of our staff trained to date, but we will be stepping that up in the near future. And we're working in partnership. So Nadine helpfully has been out and about talking about the stuff that we're doing in this space. Had a really good discussion and lots of interest from our partners across the NHS in Wales through the Directors of Digital. So I think more work in that space really in terms of how we can support the local organisations and learn from local organisations who are also kind of doing quite a lot of work in this space. So I think there are real opportunities there. And actually joining this up with the really good work that is part of the strategic approach from Health Education Improvement Wales around the digital capabilities framework, because that's targeted at NHS staff and their kind of digital maturity, if you like. So supporting that work has been a key aspect. So I think really the last thing is that we've also commissioned a piece of work that's underway at the moment with Compass as a key partner to look at what is it that our public and the patients on kind of our user population want from us in this space in terms of digital inclusion. So how is it that we should be engaging? What is it that we need to have in place to ensure that we're learning from where we are now and how we take on board all of the requirements, but do that in a way that we are ensuring that seldom heard voices and that we are heard, and we have the opportunity to really kind of I suppose set our approach to being digitally inclusive on the right footing. So really keen really for that work that will come back. I think we will see a draft report next week. So that's something that we can also share with the board in due course. But again, kind of a demonstration of our commitment to this as an organisation, to really kind of learning and listening to those who actually have been doing this a lot longer than we have and have the expertise in this area to help us to learn and mature and improve. So I think that was probably about it, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Helen. And yeah, I mean, it's great to see us doing so much work, but also us working with others, because we're not going to achieve what we need to achieve without the help and support of others. And interestingly, Helen and I were at the Bevan Commission meeting yesterday, presenting on the work of DHCW, and one of the key issues raised was digital inclusion. So it is something that is a very live issue, and I'm pleased to see that we're doing so much in the space. I've got Andrew and then Marilyn who'd like to come in. Andrew, you first.
Just to say very well done to everybody, because I'm fortunate outside of my board role in my day job role to have been involved. I don't pretend to have done any of the hard work that's been done. I've just done a bit of IG around it, as you do. So actually seeing this happen has been really quite exciting and refreshing. The some of I mean, Joanna Dundon's been really is really passionate about this work, and I think she deserves a shout out as well. And Claire and Sarah Jane's team, I know, is very much involved in some of the work as well. We've just been looking at information governance arrangements around some of that work as well. So it's quite exciting for me, because I can see it on both sides of the fence, and the one side in promoting digital inclusion as part of our roles, plus also in my other day job, which is in information governance, and seeing some of that come together. So really well done to everybody. But I can't pretend to have done all the hard work myself, because that lies with those facilitators on the ground, really.
Thank you, Andrew. Marilyn.
Well, very similar to Andrew, I want to say, Jack and Bar, thank you for all the hard work, and it's really good that you are leading it, because it has to come from the top for it to really make a difference. I've actually met with Compass recently as well, as part of DHCW, and one of the things I want to task us with as an organisation is looking at the people who are currently not engaged, because digital inclusion, like Andrew, I wear another hat where I actually don't get paid. I'm to call myself a community champion, when I'm just involved with the community, and people come to me and with the issues and sometimes feedback. And so often there's engagement with the people who are umbrella organisations, I call them. But for me, sometimes the most excluded people are the people who are not represented there. So for me, the challenge for us as DHCW is to try to hear, they call themselves and hear voices. And for us, from a DHCW point of view, I'd like to think we think about them as need to reach groups or people we need to reach, because they're the voices that often are most marginalised. And so when we come back, perhaps a year from now, as well as looking at the existing organisations we've reached, I'd like us to have branched out a bit more. Alistair often talks about this, about into the citizens really, that we have within the community. So yeah, thank you for that, Sarah. Well, sorry, thank you for that, sorry, Helen, and thank you for that great commitment. And as I said, we just need to just continue build on that to make sure that we're making a difference, really.
Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, Helen. And again, it's one of the ones we note, but I think we note it with appreciation and pass on the board's appreciation and for the hard work that's been done by a number of people across a number of departments on this issue.
Thank you.
Okay, if we move then on to the next item, which is it's a first for Claire introducing this item. It's 4.6. It's the strategic procurement report. Claire.
Diolch, Simon. Thank you. I'd just like to thank Evan actually for leading the commercial team so successfully and handing them over to me from the 1st of March. And like Simon said, this is my first commercial report, so thank you, Evan. I have two procurements ready for approval for the board this morning, so I'll take each of those in turn. The first of which relates to an agile product delivery partner, which is based on discovery, development and deployment, and it's a framework agreement. This is something that's been through a competitive process, an open procurement process. It is for 4 years, from the 1st of April to the 31st of March 2028. It's for a value of 20 million, but this is a framework agreement. So this would then mean that there would be call-off arrangements underneath this, which would have to be in accordance with the scope and call-off procedure under the framework agreement. It's for KNOS, and it's actually to support the DSPP, the Digital Services for Patients and Public programme, which is delivering the NHS app. So the details of which are in the papers. So are the board willing to approve that first procurement?
Nearly, I was on mute again. Can I just make one observation, Claire? Because I should have looked. I don't know how these appear on our website as contracts, because they will appear on our website as contracts we hold, isn't it? But there's probably not a huge understanding of what a framework contract agreement means. So people will see £20 million framework agreement and think we have a £20 million contract with KNOS. So whether it's possible to ensure that we put an explanatory sentence, a simple explanatory sentence about what that is. And clearly, as it stands at the moment, we'll spend very little of it because we have no money identified for the app beyond the end of the next financial year. So I think an explanatory sentence would be helpful, because people could just look at that and think, oh, there's a £20 million contract for one organisation there. But that's the only observation, Claire. Any questions or comments on this one? People happy to approve it? Yep, thank you very much. Okay, Claire, the second one.
The second one then relates to
the Cabinet Office, which I thought, hang on, but there we go.
Yeah, so this one is in relation to the Welsh immunisation system and the vaccine programme that supports the COVID-19 vaccine rollout. As part of that process, we moved the process for notification to the use of Gov.uk Notify. That service is provided by the Cabinet Office, and it's through a memorandum of association, a memorandum of understanding. This again is this is an annual contract with effect from the 1st of April, and it's a call-off arrangement up to the value of £2.5 million. So this will enable us to notify using the .uk gov arrangements for the COVID notification. So again, this one is subject to board approval today.
Okay, people happy to approve it? Yeah, thank you very much. I think that covers your strategic procurement.
Yeah, there is there is another item on the agenda for note, which is shows the pipeline of procurement activities over the forthcoming year that which would primarily come through the board, given the values. And again, through the boards over the forthcoming year, you'll see some of those come forward as they are ready for approval.
Okay. Thank you all very much. We've landed exactly where we needed to be in terms of time. So we're going to take a half-hour break now. And then if people could come back just a few moments before 1 o'clock, and we'll conclude the meeting after the lunch break. And please do turn your cameras off and go on mute. Thank you all. See you in a while. Pnawn da, afternoon. I think everyone's back. Welcome back. I think so. Marilyn, we're waiting for, but okay, we better make a start. It's just gone 1 o'clock. So with the item 5.1, the structured assessment 2023 and annual audit report 2023, which is a regular item. People will be aware at this meeting, and it is good to welcome our colleagues from Audit Wales, Darren Griffiths and Nathan Couch. Welcome to you both. I think you're going to kick us off, Darren, is that right?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, over to you then, Darren.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Mr Cadeirydd. Mae gennym ni cyflwyniad wedi baratoi ar eich cyfer chi heddiw. Diolch am rannu hwnnw. Diolch yn fawr iawn am y cyfle i ni fynychu'r cyfarfod heddiw i gyflwyno'r prif ganfyddiadau a negeseuon o'n hadroddiad asesiad strwythuredig ar gyfer y flwyddyn 2023. Mae fersiwn Cymraeg o'r sleidiau ar gael yn eich pecynnau. Sleid nesaf os gwelwch yn dda. Felly dyma'r ail adroddiad rydym wedi baratoi ar gyfer iechyd a gofal digidol Cymru yn unol â'n dyletswyddau statudol, ac mae'n canolbwyntio ar 4 maes, sef troloeuwder, effeithiolrwydd a chydlyniad y bwrdd, systemau sicrwydd corfforaethol y sefydliad, dull corfforaethol y sefydliad o gynllunio, a dull corfforaethol y sefydliad o reoli adnoddau ariannol. Rydym wedi defnyddio nifer o wahanol ddulliau ar gyfer cwblhau'r gwaith yma, ac ar y pwynt yma hoffwn diolch i bawb am ei hamser wrth i ni gwblhau y gwaith, a hoffwn diolch yn arbennig i Chris a Laura yn y tîm llywodraethu corfforaethol am ei cymorth a chydweithrediad llawn a pharod wrth i ni gwblhau y gwaith yma. Sleid nesaf os gwelwch yn dda. Felly dyma prif gasgliad ein gwaith. Felly yn ein barn ni, mae trefniadau corfforaethol sefydliad o ran llywodraethu, sicrwydd, cynllunio a rheolaeth ariannol yn dda ar y cyfan gyda rhai cyfleoedd i'w cryfhau ymhellach. Fodd bynnag mae'r sefydliad fel y gwyddoch yn wynebu risgiau sylweddol o ran adnoddau cyllid a buddsoddi y bydd angen ei rheoli'n ofalus i sicrhau ei fod mewn sefyllfa i gyflawni ei flaenoriaethau tymor byr ac amcanion tymor hwy wrth barhau i fod yn gynaliadwy yn ariannol. Sleid nesaf, os gwelwch yma. O ran y maes troelwydr, effeithiolrwydd a chydlyniad y bwrdd, yn ein barn ni mae'r bwrdd yn un sefydlog a chydlynol sy'n cynnal ei busnes yn briodol mewn modd effeithiol a thryloyw. Ond mae cyfleoedd i wella rhai o'r trefniadau hyn ymhellach. Gwelsom dystiolaeth bod y sefydliad yn parhau i ddangos ymrwymiad cryf i gynnal busnes y bwrdd a'i phwyllgorau mewn modd sy'n droeloyw i'r cyhoedd. Gwelsom dystiolaeth bod cyfarfodydd y bwrdd a phwyllgorau yn cael eu cadeirio'n dda a'i cynnal yn briodol. Mae ganddynt agendau cytbwys ac maent yn derbyn papurau o ansawdd da. Gwelsom dystiolaeth bod camau cadarnhaol wedi cymeryd i addasu strwythur y pwyllgorau i adlewyrchu rôl newydd y bwrdd o ran goruchwylio rhaglenni digidol cenedlaethol. Gwelsom dystiolaeth bod y bwrdd wedi ymrwymo i gryfhau ei ymgysylltiad â staff, ond mae cyfleoedd yn parhau i'r bwrdd ymgysylltu'n uniongyrchol a dinasyddion a defnyddwyr gwasanaethau clinigol mewn cyrff iechyd eraill. Gwelsom hefyd dystiolaeth bod y bwrdd yn gydlynol ac yn sefydlog gyda threfniadau da mewn lle ar gyfer anwytho aelodau newydd, datblygu'r bwrdd a hunan adolygu. Sleid nesaf os gwelwch yn dda. O ran systemau sicrwydd corfforaethol y sefydliad, yn ein barn ni maent yn gadarn ac yn gweithredu'n effeithiol, ond mae rhai cyfleoedd i wella rhai o'r trefniadau hyn ymhellach. Gwelsom dystiolaeth bod trefniadau'r sefydliad ar gyfer rheoli risgiau strategol a chorfforaethol yn effeithiol. Mae dealltwriaeth y sefydliad o'i archwaith risg yn aeddfedu a dylai hyn fod y gymorth iddo gryfhau'r trefniadau hyn ymhellach. Gwelsom dystiolaeth hefyd bod trefniadau rheoli perfformiad y sefydliad yn parhau'n weddol effeithiol, yn fodd bynnag mae cyfleoedd yn bodoli i roi mwy o sicrwydd i'r bwrdd ar y camau sy'n cael eu cymeryd i wella tan berfformiad mewn rhai meysydd. Gwelsom dystiolaeth bod gan y sefydliad drefniadau sicrwydd ansawdd effeithiol ac mae'n gwneud cynnydd da o safbwynt gweithredu'r dyletswyddau newydd mewn perthynas ag ansawdd a gonestrwydd. A gwelsom dystiolaeth hefyd bod gan y sefydliad drefniadau effeithiol ar gyfer monitro ac olrhain cynnydd yn erbyn argymhellion archwilio mewnol ac allanol. Y sleid nesaf os gwelwch yn dda. O ran dull corfforaethol y sefydliad o gynllunio, yn ein barn ni mae'r trefniadau hyn yn parhau i aeddfedu, ond mae cyfleoedd yn bodoli i ddatblygu cynlluniau cyflawni ategol manwl ar gyfer rhai strategaethau a chynlluniau corfforaethol i sicrhau bod y bwrdd yn gallu cadw trosolwg ohonynt a'i monitro'n effeithiol. Yn ogystal, fel y gwyddoch, mae'r sefydliad yn wynebu risgiau adnoddau buddsoddi sylweddol a gallu'n effeithio ar ei allu i gyflawni blaenoriaethau strategol a thrawsnewidiol allweddol. Gwelsom dystiolaeth bod dull corfforaethol y sefydliad ar gyfer cynhyrchu strategaethau a chynlluniau yn effeithiol, ond fel y nodwyd yn gynharach, mae'r sefydliad yn wynebu risgiau sylweddol a allai effeithio ar ei allu i gyflawni blaenoriaethau. Gwelsom dystiolaeth hefyd bod gan y sefydliad drefniadau effeithiol ar gyfer goruchwylio'r gwaith a gyflawni ei gynllun tymor canolig integredig, ond mae angen cryfhau'r trefniadau ar gyfer goruchwylio'r gwaith o gyflawni strategaethau a chynlluniau corfforaethol eraill. Y sleid nesaf, os gwelwch yn dda. O ran dull corfforaethol y sefydliad ar gyfer rheoli adnoddau, yn ein barn ni mae'r trefniadau ar gyfer cynllunio, monitro ac adrodd ar faterion ariannol yn effeithiol, a fodd bynnag gallai heriau ariannol cynyddol a gordybyniaeth ar arbedion anghylchol effeithio ar gynaladwyedd ariannol y sefydliad yn y dyfodol. A gwelsom dystiolaeth bod y sefydliad wedi cyflawni ei amcanion ariannol y llynedd ac mae'n rhagweld y bydd yn cyflawni ei amcanion ariannol eleni, a fodd bynnag mae'n sicrwydd ynghylch y sefyllfa ariannol yn y dyfodol. Gwelsom dystiolaeth bod gan y sefydliad ddull weddol effeithiol o gynllunio ariannol ac mae'n glir ynghylch ei heriau ariannol. Fodd bynnag mae'r sefydliad yn parhau i ddibynnu'n ormodol ar swyddi gwag i gyflawni targedau arbedion ac nid yw hyn yn gynaladwy yn y tymor canolig i'r hir dymor. Gwelsom hefyd dystiolaeth bod gan y sefydliad drefniadau effeithiol ar gyfer goruchwylio a chraffu ar faterion reolaeth ariannol, ond efallai bydd angen cynyddu hyn yng ngoleuni'r heriau ariannol sy'n wynebu'r sefydliad. Sleid nesaf os gwelwch yn dda. Felly rydym wedi gwneud 5 argymelliad mewn perthynas a drefniadau cadeirio pwyllgorau ymgysylltu â'r rhanddeiliaid, rheoli risgiau mewn perthynas ag adnoddau a blaenoriaethau, cyflawni cynlluniau a strategaethau corfforaethol a sicrhau cynaladwyedd ariannol. Mae'r sefydliad wedi ymateb i'r argymellion hyn ac rydym wedi gweld tystiolaeth bod rhai ohonynt wedi cael eu rhoi ar waith yn barod. I gloi rydym hefyd wedi cyhoeddi ein hadroddiad archwilio blynyddol sy'n crynhoi canfyddiadau ein holl waith yn iechyd a gofal digidol Cymru yn ystod 2023. A hoffwn gloi drwy ddiolch i chi am eich gwrandawiad ac rydym yn hapus iawn i ateb unrhyw gwestiynau ynglyn â'r gwaith yma. Diolch cadeirydd.
Diolch yn fawr, Darren. Any questions or comments? Helen.
Thank you, and thank you, Darren and Nathan. That's really helpful in terms of the feedback, and I think really fair in terms of the areas of focus really for us in terms of how we improve things and take on board that feedback. I suppose the one to pick up is, before Simon does perhaps, is that, you rightly draw out the over-reliance perhaps on short-term savings that are funding kind of, the balanced position and the risk associated. I guess just to draw out really the link to achieving longer-term sustainable savings, if you like, or efficiencies, financial efficiencies, is directly linked to the work that we're trying to do to modernize the way that we operate as an organization. And that kind of is directly linked to, you know, our cloud strategy, our shift to product, and all of the things that we talk about under Mission 5, really. So just we're alive to that as an issue. We understand that, and actually what we're doing is trying to put a strategic wrap around the delivery of that, with Claire heading up a new transformation program that's going to drive forward some of those efficiencies. Of course, some of that will need some parallel investment, and that's for us to kind of, you know, set out as we move through that process. Some of it is just about how we are changing our operating model and how we change how we do things in the organisation and strip out some of the efficiencies that are there for us. But just thought it was helpful to hopefully to point that out.
Thank you, Helen. We are currently undertaking a deeper dive review into the organisation's financial savings arrangements. So we will be picking up some of the issues you've raised as part of that work. So thank you again.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I thought the report generally was really helpful assessment of where we're at organisationally at the, you know, going into the start of our 3rd year. I think there's some areas that, you know, we can take a lot of comfort from. Having a stable, cohesive board in the challenging times and the environment within which we're operating is really important, but not to be complacent. And there's plenty within it for us to continue to work on. I think the soft intelligence for board members working in a hybrid way came through, and I think that's something we're working hard on tackling. The plans and milestones linked to strategies, and of course the investment risks are key to us. So I thought it was really helpful. I just wanted to, Chair, put on record, thanks to Darren, because I don't know if it's common knowledge, Darren, but you're moving on from DHCW being our performance audit manager, and you've been with us since our inception and given us lots of challenge, lots of insight, lots of advice, which has been really helpful for us organisation as we've grown and developed. So I just wanted to say thanks very much for that, and wishing you all the best for the next bodies that you'll be overseeing.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I'd echo that on behalf of the board, Darren. Do we know who the super sub is?
Yes, and my colleague Andrew Doughton will be replacing me as the audit manager, and I'm moving over to WAST.
Okay. Marion, and then Claire.
Diolch Cadeirydd, a gain ategu fy ngwerthfawrogiad o'r gwaith manwl sydd wedi digwydd yn yr asesiad yma. Dwi'n meddwl bod yn asesiad gonest, teg, ac yn gadarnhaol iawn i ni fel bwrdd, a ni'n dathlu'n penblwydd yn 2 oed. Mi gaethon ni gyfle wrth gwrs yn y pwyllgor archwilio yn ddiweddar i graffu ar yr adroddiad. Ond swn i'n licio falle o nghyd-destun y cyfarfod bwrdd yma, tynnu sylw at un o'r argymhellion, sef yr awgrym yma dylen ni fel corff fod yn ystyried gwneud mwy i ymgysylltu'n benodol efo poblogaeth Cymru, cleifion Cymru, ac defnyddwyr gwasanaeth y maes clinigol. Rwan, dyn ni ddim yn gyflenwr ar yr heng flaen fel petai yn uniongyrchol yn delio efo cleifion. Felly, jyst meddwl tybed fyddet ti'n dymuno ymateb a falle crisialu i ni ddau o syniadau ffordd y gallen ni fod ymlaen i weithredu'n y maes yma. Diolch.
Diolch, Marian. Yn fwy na hapus i gynnig sylwadau. Yn amlwg derbyn y sylwadau ynglyn â'r ffaith dydy y sefydliad ddim yn gyflenwr ac yn ddarpanrw gwasanaethau uniongyrchol, ond yn amlwg mae'r sefydliad yn cydweithio'n agos iawn gyda nifer o gyrff iechyd eraill, megis y byrdau iechyd. Felly mae yna gyfleoedd o bosib i fod yn defnyddio'r rhwydweithiau a'r trefniadau a'r strwythurau sydd gan y byrdau iechyd mae'r lle ar gyfer ymgysylltu a chleifion a'r rhanddeiliaid mwyn cael blas o'r adborth sydd yn dod ganddyn nhw ynglyn â effeithiolrwydd rhai o'r systema mae'r sefydliad yma'n gyfrifol amdanyn nhw lle. Felly, da ni'n fwy na hapus i gael sgwrs tu allan i'r cyfarfod yma i drafod yr argymhelliad yna ymhellach. Diolch.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Marion. Claire.
So I think it's really helpful, and I think we've just had a number of conversations on the financial position and the IMTP, and I think echoing Helen's comments, it's really helped us to inform what our longer term transformational operating model looks like, and what does the financial consequences of that model, and therefore what is a non-payroll type operating saving that we can do recurrently as a result of that. So that's really informed some of the transformational Mission 5 work that we are pulling together. And I think that will help direct some of the observations around an over-reliance on short-term savings. So it really tried to lay out what the longer-term savings plan is, which I think will be really helpful. The other point I'd like to make is the fact that the return on the investment from DHCW, and whilst we tend to look at it from a DHCW perspective alone, the system returns from the work of DHCW is significant. And although we don't necessarily declare them as our savings, it goes back to the value and contribution that we make. It's really about how do we work alongside each other to really demonstrate that in a way that actually the system benefits from DHCW are quite significant and they're potentially recurrent. So I think that the holding the mirror up to us has really helped us really switch our focus from the short term to more of the long term, and we've put some significant work in place now to try and address that and visualize that, hopefully when that work is complete, to really look at what are the levers we can pull outside workforce that can generate sustainable savings. And actually, are they savings for DHCW, or are they savings from the NHS in Wales? And how do we balance that insight? So thank you to Nathan and to Darren for the work that you've done. And actually, that's helped us inform the work going forward, which obviously we'll share through the audit committee and once we've got to a position to share it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Claire.
Okay. And I think it's also worth in your recommendations, as you know, we've already acted on the chairing of the PDC, the Programme Delivery Committee already. So, and in the next structured assessment, you say how speedily we react to recommendations, Nathan. Okay, I don't think there's any other questions or comments. Can I thank? I mean, Nathan, obviously, I see a lot more of, but thank you, Nathan, and you, Darren, and wish you all the best with your next assignment. And we have been asked to receive the Structured Assessment 2023 for assurance, and I'm sure people are happy to do that. And we look forward to working closely with you again over the next year.
Deal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Take care.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
If we move then on to the next item, which is the Corporate Risk Register, and I'll invite Chris Darling, the Board Secretary, to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I'm going to work through the risk register report. I'm going to start off with a topic we covered earlier, opportunities. So the start of the report focuses on opportunities and just considers risks from an opportunities and threats perspective. I think never more important than in the context of the discussions we've had today from a IMTP planning and delivery perspective, and given the pressures that the health service as a whole is under, and the huge opportunities that digital products and services can give to drive efficiencies and improve patient outcomes. So just going to run through a few opportunities and try and reference back to some of the conversations we've had throughout the board meeting. So the first one is around the growing importance of data. We've identified as an opportunity, but key, which has been flagged through this board meeting, is the driving value from data and the benefits to the system. Digital services driving service transformation. So we've talked about consideration of what a post-DPIF era looks like from a funding perspective. We've talked about the impact, in particular next financial year, some of the DPIF priorities on medicine, NDR and maternity in particular will have, and the need to ensure effective stakeholder engagement on the digital agenda around service transformation. we've talked about another opportunity, tackling the shortage of technical talent, and Claire referenced where we are deliberately going at risk with some posts where we know there's potential shortfalls. So we're taking a very much an opportunity versus risk approach on that. And the shift from capital to a recurrent revenue-based model, and there is an opportunity there, and as has just been discussed through the structured assessment report, the need to ensure we are able to make that transition from short-term short-term capital funding to a longer-term funding model. And then the last two opportunities I was going to draw out, one was around automation and artificial intelligence. Ivan referenced in the long-term strategy, the strategic objectives that's been added into the strategy around AI and deploying automation technologies safely. And finally, patient empowerment through apps as we continue to roll out the NHS Wales app to all GP practices in Wales. So with that context, I'm just going to move through the main body of the report. There is the updated Global Risks Landscape Report link 2024 in the reports. We will cover that at board development session in April, just to pick out some areas, some new chapters that have been flagged through that process: cyber insecurity, misinformation and disinformation, and adverse outcomes from AI technologies. Again, all things to look through from a threats and opportunities perspective. From a risk profile point of view, DHCW currently has 16 risks on its corporate risk register, 11 of which are detailed within the register in the public session today. The other 5 risks are private, 4 of which are considered at the Digital Governance and Safety Committee, and 1 is currently overseen by the Programmes Delivery Committee. There's 1 new risk, and I'm going to work through the new risk changes in risk score and risks removed, and then bring colleagues in where they are risk owners, if that's okay, just so we get them all done. So 0334, impact of the cost of the transition team. So this relates to the transition team relating to the NHS Wales app. That's a new risk that have come on since our last board meeting. 4 risks have been removed. So there's 3 public ones. 0308, sustainable funding for NIAS. So that's a National Intelligent Integrated Audit Solution. 0321, sustainable funding for WASPI. That's a similar risk relating to funding to the Welsh Accord for sharing personal information. And then 0329, choose pharmacy maintaining the funding gap. That risk has also been removed or downgraded since the last meeting. So that's the changes in risk scores. And then 3 risks I just want to bring to the board's attention within the main corporate risk register. 0332, sustainable programmes funding. Clearly, we've had a lot of discussion on this throughout the board meeting, but this risk very much reflects the DPIF funding reduction going into 2024-25. And board members will recall at the last board meeting, Ivan described the approach to having one overarching risk rather than listing out 5 or 6. Clearly, mitigation plans for each now are being done in a bit of detail, as are quality impact assessments relating to each of the programmes impacted. The second additional risk I wanted to highlight, 0333, the intensive care implementation delay. And finally, 0331, the fixed term resource funding position. So those were all the risks I wanted to highlight to the board today in terms of changes and areas that we're keeping a very close eye on. Just going to invite any of the risk owners for those that I've mentioned, if they want to come in. Ivan, there's a few in your area, the new risk in terms of the transition team, and then the those that I've mentioned, intensive care and sustainable programme funding. Do you want to comment on any of those?
Yeah, diolch, Chris. gwna i ddim sylw ar yr cyllid i'r rhaglenni, ni wedi trafod hynna cryn dipyn heddiw yn barod. O ran y tîm ar gyfer yr app, jyst i ddehongli y risg yna, beth i ni'n gwneud yw, ar hyn o bryd, mae'r gwaith datblygu a gwaith cynnal a gwasanaeth yn cael ei wneud ar yn rhan ni gan gontractiwr, Ceinos, oedd y contract neu'r fframwaith yn cael ei ystyried anghynt bore yma. Ni'n mynd i adeiladu tîm mewnol i wneud yr un gwaith. A mae hwnna'n rhan o symud tuag at dull cynnyrch o weithio ar draws y sefydliad, a ni'n anelu i gael y tîm yna yn ei le erbyn diwedd mis Medi, a pan wy'n dweud yn ei le, wedi recrwtio a gyda'r sgiliau angenrheidiol mwyn cymryd y gwaith i ni ar hyn o bryd yn prynu oddi wrth darparwr allanol. Mae'r arian i dalu am hwnnw yn dod o di fewn i'r rhaglen. Ond os yw'r tîm ddim yn barod, mi fydd gyda ni tîm cyfan wedi recrwtio sydd ddim yn barod i gymryd y gwaith, a mi fyddwn ni'n parhau i dalu'r contractiwr allanol i wneud y gwaith. A mae hwnna, felly mae yna elfen o risg ariannol yna, ond mae yna risg hefyd i ni o ran ein gallu ni i adeiladu tîm cynnyrch a profi'n hunain bod ni'n gallu rhedeg hynna mewn ffordd effeithiol, mewn cyfnod o fusoedd yn hytrach na blynyddoedd. Felly, o'n i jyst eisiau amlinellu hwnnw. A wedyn, o ran y risg ar WCIS, sef gofal dwys, y system gofal dwys, ni'n wedi newid y geiriad just tipyn bach, y risg sydd gyda ni fyna yw sicrwydd o gwmpas y dyddiadau a bydd y system yn mynd yn fyw mewn byrddau iechyd. I ni'n gweithio'n agos iawn gyda byrddau iechyd ar y rhaglen hon, fel ar bob rhaglen arall. Ond beth sydd angen arno ni oddi wrth y byrddau iechyd hynny yw ymrwymiad diamod i ddyddiad i weithredu yn y rhaglen honno. A i ni'n ddigon hyderus bod gyda ni fwriad oddi wrth y byrddau iechyd i weithredu ar y rhaglen, ond does dim dyddiad wedi i gloi mewn i'r rhaglen. A mae hynna'n gwneud i'n anodd wedyn i gynllunio yn erbyn amserlen sicr. Felly dyna'r risg sydd gyda ni yn y lle hynna. So jyst i ddehongli y ddwy risg yma.
Thank you, Ivan. And finally, Sarah Jane or Claire, was there anything you wanted to add on the fixed term funding, resource funding risks?
Go on, Sarah Jane.
Happy to, yes. A piece of work was done for the strategic resourcing group, and I think Mark Cox obviously led that piece of work, and it was really helpful, which showcased really that we've got a number of people that have got permanent contracts, and they have had for a number of years, but the actual funding stream isn't part of core, isn't supported long term. So we've put in some new measures, some checks and balances, really, both with shoring up the scrutiny panel, executive escalations, but also looking at moving forwards, we're trying to reduce the liability that we've got and to work that through internal processes to bring that down and to monitor that each month at the strategic resourcing group, and then obviously provide that update on a monthly basis to the executives. Alongside that, we're also what we're calling holding the front door to make sure that we're not increasing new liability and putting permanent contracts in place where the funding streams are short term. So we've got a number of robust new internal processes which are supported by the people in OD team, recruitment, and obviously the finance team and senior finance officers, but really it's a whole organisational approach to this. So it's a known quantity now. The process has been articulated and agreed. It is now up and running, and we're looking at bringing that down over time, as well as obviously not increasing the liability moving forward. So just wanted to provide assurance to the board today that that has received quite a lot of attention and is continuing to do so.
Thank you, Sarah Jane. Did Claire want to add anything?
No, the only other dimension I would say is that we're looking at the skill sets within that. So, we had the conversation before, it's understanding our strategic skill sets and recruiting to those as opposed to our support and getting the right balance. But yeah. Okay,
thank you. Chris, anything else you wanted to add?
Those were all the areas I wanted to pick out and invite comments on. Happy to take any questions.
Anyone got any comments or questions? If not, we've been asked to receive the report, which I'm sure we're happy to do. Thank you. Okay, if we move then on to the Integrated Organisational Performance Report, and that's being introduced by Claire Osmondson-Little. Claire, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so I'm going to talk through some of the highlights of performance during January and February. It's been quite a busy period. As the finance showed, Q4 tends to be quite active in terms of programmes, but also in terms of operations. In programmes, we've seen the NHS app rollout, and we've also seen some quite time-critical work in association with radiology and critical care. But also within primary care and GP, there's been some significant GP market changes, and that has also impacted on some of the work that they're doing there, together with a lot of activity around the community and eye care. So I'll start with operations. Obviously, we're transitioning to a new data centre, and the physical move of servers is going well. We've done a lot of activity in January and February as a result of the physical move, but it has been subjected to quite a number of network issues, and the network changes have now been reprofiled into Q1. So that has had implications for our routine failover activity and testing. So as you note in the performance report, you'll see one red where this has been slightly delayed due to the activity around the data centre. Also to note is the Welsh point of care testing. As a result of the move, it has become apparent we need to replace some hardware, and that procurement of that hardware replacement will start in 24-25 and be part of our capital programme. From a strategic programme activity, obviously I mentioned the NHS app work. We've now onboarded more than 116 practices, and that was being supported by Sam Hall's team in the primary care activity. And we've also been quite active within the critical care, where the work to adopt test and rollout is ongoing. When you look at performance within primary care and mental health, one of our GP suppliers during the period has indicated that it will not continue deployment within their GP systems with it contract within Wales. And therefore, as part of our IMTP and the work that Sam's team has been undertaking for the plan for next year, we have planned in the implications of that and the cost implications of that within the IMTP and the primary care budget. Work has also continued in the planning and design of the platform replacement for the WCCIS. And I also should note, is the success of the spring booster as part of the COVID support. It's also important to note that there has been an improvement in the selection of the cohort and the testing of that cohort. Ordinarily, during COVID, that took a period of weeks, and the team have successfully implemented changes. That means that is a far more succinct and speedier process. So well done for the team of that. Obviously, from a finance and business assurance, time during this period has been finalising the plan and the position for this financial year. And the commercial team are now focused on the hardware procurement for WPOCT, but also working with the SLA arrangements with the NHS England. From a people and organisation development, there has been an improvement in the sickness position, but our focus is now shifting to the appraisal completion, so to keep and maintain our track record in that area. And finally, from a clinical and insurance and information governance perspective, we have seen quite a high number of freedom of information requests. It's the highest it's been this year. And the number of clinical incidents outstanding is quite high. So we're obviously focusing that area as well going forward. So as I alluded to, quite a busy period in January and February in DHCW. We're in amongst that, we're finalising the IMTP, which you've just seen. And again, that was a bit disrupted as a result of some of the changes that we saw with the DPIF allocation in the period. Happy to take any questions on the report.
Well, people think I was just refreshing my memory on the bit on the FOI requests. I mean, are they in specific areas, or are they sort of randomly spread across a range of issues, or are there particular issues that we seem to get FOIs around? Does anyone know? Helen?
I do.
I'll leave Andrew committed.
Go on then, Andrew.
A lot of them are information requests for things held by information services, but there are some more complex corporate requests that come in. So I oversee the FY process
Right.
as one of my many roles, but I don't actually do the work again to actually compile all that. I had off to Marcus and Ben who do that work. So, yeah, it's a variety of areas. A lot of them are information services requests, but some of the corporate requests can be quite complex, and we do tend to try our very best, even when it's a lot of work, to try and make sure that we give the requesters the best response that they can have. You know, because some things we don't hold them in the way that they quite in the way that they request.
They are, yeah. Okay, thanks, Andrew. Helen, do you still want to come in?
So yeah, it's as Andrew says, a whole variety. The information ones are specific, kind of, you know, how many of these, or, you know, have we seen an increase in a trend for that? It's those sort of things that come in there, and there'll be things like queries around kind of commercial arrangements, contracts we've got in place, or how much we spend on something. So a huge variety. Nothing in specifically in terms of seeing more of them. They are generally kind of across the board.
Okay, Ivan.
Thanks, Simon. Yeah, I just want to highlight, so as Claire says, it's been a really, really busy period. And as we've been discussing all the way through the morning, really, there's a lot of pressure on the system in terms of, you know, the financial situation, but as well as stakeholder relationships. And I just want to highlight a couple of things that I just want to pay credit to the teams, and particularly to the collaboration across our own organisation. It's one of our 5 values. And I've been really impressed about how resilient that has been in the face of the pressure that everybody is facing. The first of those is on the app itself. So in the last quarter, in the last 3 months, they ploughed through another 200 GP practices connected, which means that every GP practice is now connected in Wales, with really close working with Sam's team, as Claire mentioned. That's taken the number of downloaded users to the app at the last count from around about 80,000 just before Christmas to about 130,000 at last count. That's really rapid in 3 months. And that's obviously put pressure on contact lines and service and incoming requests and queries and other things, which requires joint working to respond to that between Sam's area on the service desk, Sam's area on the primary care team, and My Health Online, and then the DSPP program team. And, you know, in an under pressure environment, but teams are working really positively, and the same goes for the onboarding of a new in-house product team. So I think it's really impressive, and it's a real credit to those teams. The NDR as well. So the NDR went operationally live back in August of last year. It's really driving forward now with bringing data warehousing and analytics into the end app environment. Is working very closely with Rachel Powell and Viridian's team and the Information Services Directorate. They're a few months now into a program of bringing that information on, but also working with external partners. So about 2 weeks ago, I think, we brought all of the NHS executives analytics and reporting information previously through the NHS delivery unit, previously held on premises in Swansea Bay, all of that now into the National Data Analytics Platform environment, all of it migrated across and operating. And again, you know, some really impressive work which is going on there. And then finally, and again, it's a primary care connection in the medicines program. In terms of the electronic transfer of prescriptions, there was a technical proof of concept and an initial service proof of concept in RIL just before Christmas. That's now stepping out into other GPs and other practices. Again, very, very close working with Sam, especially given the changes to the supplier landscape in primary care that were that crystallized in sort of late January, I think it was, and early February. So there's a whole amount of work going on, and you know, I know we've got values, but under pressure, you know, people respond in certain ways, and I think it's such a credit to the organisation that people are not responding to that. And if anything, we're deepening the collaboration across the organisation, and I think it's a real credit to everybody involved.
Excellent. And it's also, and as you know, I've mentioned this in previous meetings, that a good indicator to look at is levels of sickness around when organisations are under pressure, and it's encouraging to see that is, well, not doing the opposite of going up, which is a good thing, indeed of coming down. And it's still a figure that the rest of the NHS would be incredibly envious of. Okay, any other comments or questions on the report? If not, I'll thank Claire and others who've contributed. And we're lovely, and we've been asked to receive this report, which I'm sure you're happy to do. Okay, if we move on to the various committee highlight reports now, and the first is the Programme Delivery Committee highlight report, and I invite David Selway to highlight anything particular from the written reports.
Thanks, Simon. I'll take the report as read and just highlight a couple of things. There are 4 programmes which got featured in the alert section of the report. 2 of those, the eye care programme and the cancer informatics system, were there because of funding issues, which we've already covered on today's call. The 2 others I'll touch briefly on were the Welsh Intensive Care programme, which was due to go live last November. It hasn't gone live yet because of issues flagged up by Naira and Bevan. There's a programme of work being worked up in order to make some improvements, which will hopefully get that over the line. And there's a new plan with a new delivery line being worked on as we speak. And then the second thing I just wanted to touch on was the Welsh Patient Administration System, and in particular the Bridgen data migration. Sam gave us a really good update of what's actually quite a complex program with high volumes of data, lots of stakeholders, and a large number of integrated services effective. We've received a level of insurance, but we did identify that there are some risks to the timescale and cost, but we also received assurance that those are being managed closely by the program as well. The only other thing I'll touch on is we did take a couple of items in the private session. They were due to the commercial sensitivities, and they're mentioned in the report.
Thank you very much, David. Has anyone got any questions or comments? If not, we're asked to receive that for assurance. Thank you. All the rest of the committee reports, highlight the reports now include 2 elements: is the report from their last meeting, and also there's you'll have seen from the papers that there's an annual report for the committee. So in effect, when I ask people to receive it, it'll be both for the report on the previous committee meeting and the annual report. But please do raise questions on either if you have any. So the next one is the Audit and Assurance Committee highlight report, and I'll ask Marion Wyn-Jones to present the highlight report.
Diolch Cadeirydd, mae'n bleser gen I gyflwyno pigion o'r Pwyllgor Archwilio Sicrwydd a Gynhaliwyd ganol Chwefror eleni. Ac fel mae Cadeirydd wedi sôn, fe dderbynion i'r adroddiad blynyddol y Pwyllgor, a hefyd yr hunan asesiad ar effeithiolrwydd y Pwyllgor, a braf gallu nodi fod yna gonsensws, dwi'n credu, bod y Pwyllgor o ran I berfformiad wedi aeddfedu cryn dipyn dros y blwyddyn diwethaf. Ac yn ogystal â'r adroddiadau arferol, dwi jyst eisiau tynnu sylw at yr cyflwyniad a'r drafodaeth adeiladol a gaethon ni ar genhadaeth strategol 5, y benodol felly'r heriau sy'n ymwneud â'r gweithlu, ac yn nodi'r camau sydd ar y gweill I liniaru'r risg penodol hwnnw. Roedd hi'n galonogol hefyd derbyn adroddiad yr iaith Gymraeg, ac gaethon ni glywed yn benodol am y gwaith arbennig sy'n mynd rhagddo I hwyluso asesiad sgiliau iaith mewn swydd ddisgrifiadau. A braf clywed hynny, a gai ddiolch i'r tîm a llongyfarch nhw wir am y gwaith da sydd yn digwydd y maes yr iaith. A chi'n cloi, jyst tynnu'ch sylw chi fel bwrdd at un achos o ddiffyg cydymffurfiaeth gyda'r cyfarwyddyd ariannol sefydlog, a hynny'n benodol yn ymwneud â chymeradwyo pecyn gwaith yn ôl weithredol. Fel arall, mae'r adroddiad yn sefyll, ond hapus I gymryd cwestiynau os oes gyda chi gwestiwn. Diolch.
Any questions or comments? Okay, happy to receive that for assurance. Now, I'd like to say that I deliberately missed out the DG&S committee to give David a break, but unfortunately, I just I skipped it in the agenda, so I do apologise for that, David. So if we go back then now to the Digital Governance and Safety Committee highlight report and ask David Selway to present anything, to pick out anything particularly you'd like to.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Just for the record, I chaired as vice chair because Rowan's not available at the moment. Happy to do so. The only thing I'd really like to pick out is the really good work that Ridian's team have been doing around the WASPI Code of Conduct, and the fact that we've now secured some funding in order to turn that into a code of practice, which hopefully will get recognised by the ICO. So other than that, we received assurance on the number of programmes and reviewed a number of risks. No significant things to highlight there. So it was the WASPy thing for me that I just wanted to draw to the attention of the board today.
Okay, any comments or questions? Again, to receive that for assurance, thank you. And if we move on then to the local partnership forum highlight report, and Andrew chaired the last meeting, I believe, and is going to present this report. And again, there is the annual report as well.
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I mean, as with everyone else, you had a chance to read the report. If there's anybody got any questions.
Okay, any questions or comments? Sorry, Andrew, I cut across you.
No, that's fine. I said if you're just happy to receive that, that's all. Sorry, Simon.
Happy to receive the report for assurance. Thank you all very much. And then finally, I believe, yes, to the remuneration and terms of service committee highlight report. And I just draw your attention to the alert on the last the last meeting, and I think it's that's well captured there. The committee's frustration about having to address this issue around agenda for change terms and conditions, not recognising the particular or unique roles described here of digital staff in the context of overtime payments to ensure that people are in place and that we've got the necessary human resource to do the work that needs doing often on a 24-hour basis for some things that need to be addressed. Helen, you want to come in on this one?
Yeah, actually, it wasn't on the specifics. I was going to wait for you to finish there. Just to draw your attention to we need to amend the cover sheet because it's drawn out the wrong committee and David as the chair of the committee, just on that particular paper.
Oh, the previous one. Yeah. The DG&S you're referring to.
Yeah, the RATS committee cover paper is it's saying it's got the heading is right, but in the name of committee it's got the PDC, and then it's got David as the chair as opposed to yourself. Just needs updating that bit, I think.
Oh, I see. I'm with you. They've used a template. I've got you. I was trying to find out where it was. Yeah, absolutely. If we could just amend that, note that in the minutes that unless David, you want to do that, I don't know. But okay, thank you, Helen, for pointing that out. And moving on to the last section of the agenda, any other urgent business? None has been communicated to me in advance. Does anyone have anything that try and persuade me to take it? No, thank you all very much. The date of the next meeting is Thursday, the 30th of May of this year, and I will now close the board meeting and thank everyone for their participation and our colleagues from Audit Wales for joining us for their item as well. So thank you all very much and have a good rest of the day.
Diolch.